Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the special meeting for the Planning and Zoning for Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021. Our first item is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, do we have a reading of the public notice, please?
Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Application 21-36P, 25 Talbot Lane Site Plan. This is a request by UW Vintage Lane 2 LLC for site plan approval for a 359,640 square foot distribution facility on 30.37 acres of property on property located at 5,25 Talbot Lane, 475 and 551 Governor's Highway Industrial Zone. This has been continued from October 12th, October 26th, and November 9th. To view this meeting, please tune into channel 16 if your provider is Cox Cable, or go to gmedia.swagit.com/live. Copies of the application are in file in the office of the town clerk and of the planning department, and online at www.southwindsor-ct.gov/planning-department/pages/planning and zoning. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard, and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 at 644-2511, extension 329. Bart Passaconis, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Our order of business tonight will be first to hear from the applicant, then we will hear from town staff, then we will hear from members of the public. First, those in favor, and then those against or having questions or concerns. At this time, I'll call the applicant forward. Good evening. Yes. If anyone has a cell phone, if they could, please put it to vibrate. We would appreciate it. When we get to public comment, I have a few names here on the list, and then it will be people that I call on when I ask for comments. When you come up, please identify yourself, where you're from, and please sign in on the sheet either before you speak or after you speak. We will have a 3-minute timer set for speakers, and it's our normal business. So, good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Passaconis and Vice Chairman Foley and members of the Commission. For your record, I'm Peter DeMalley, President of Design Professionals with offices in South Windsor at 21 Jeffrey Drive, and we've been here for 35 years. We're here representing the applicant for 25 Talbot Lane, and I'd like to bring to your attention a number of points. This will not be lengthy. We'll keep it as short as we can. So first of all, we submitted, I believe it was on November 17th, a number of items, revised plans. We show on those plans the conservation buffer and easement. That's sheet C-OS1. We also indicated replacing the southerly 2 trailer parking spaces, as we discussed at the last hearing on November 9th, with a striped area to accommodate tractor trailers turning around at the end of the truck court, reducing the total count of trailer spaces from 111 to 109. We also submitted light poles on the westerly side of the southern edge of the truck court have been shifted slightly north away from the residential properties as a result of the 2 trailer spaces being removed. We also indicated that the most southerly light pole on the west side of the truck has been reduced to 25 feet in height, as we discussed last time. The grading along Governor's Highway has been slightly adjusted to accommodate a future 5-foot sidewalk. Signs along Talbot Lane have been added indicating no parking, standing, or queuing. The storm drainage system maintenance and operation notes on sheet C S5 have been revised to require the evaluation of the water quality basin every 3 years, as required by the Inland Wetlands Agency. Conservation Commission, as requested by an abutter. The map entitled Compilation Survey Tree Location Sheet V-3, as submitted at the previous hearing, has been added to the plan set. And I believe that concludes what we submitted. I believe that was on November 17th to the Commission. Next item I'd like to bring to your attention is a study that we commissioned. Donald Poland has been part of our design team from day one. A study that we're going to be handing out, yes. Benjamin Wheeler, Director of Operations at Design Professionals, is handing those out as I speak. There's a study by Donald J. Poland, Dr. Poland, from Goldman in York and East Hartford, with respect to 25 Talbot Lane impact on property value and adjacent and proximate properties. I'm just going to give you a couple of highlights from that, if I may. You should have the report momentarily. I'm not going to get into details on it. Deliver his report. He is not in attendance tonight, so I understand it. So his report basically indicated that the academic and industry research on the impact of dissimilar uses, that's commercial, industrial, and residential, has consistently found either positive impacts, no negative impacts, or inconclusive findings on impact. Cite sources on that. He also did a paired sales analysis. He conducted that of properties on Edgewood Drive and on Judy Lane. The analysis focused sales of properties before and after the 2019 renovations to the Carlos Pasta facility, which is, of course, a food manufacturing facility in town. That has historically operated 3 daily shifts, 6 days a week, and received a variance to increase the building height from 40 to 60 feet, as he indicates in the report. And located on the roof of Carlos Pasta are condensers and chillers for the refrigerated freezer portions of the building. And then that's on the second page of the report you're being given. He indicates how the paired analyses for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, again on Edgewood Drive and Judy Lane. And another comment he made, the paired sales analysis shows that residential property values are trending up in value, and that the recent renovation and expansion of the Carlos Pasta manufacturing facility had no negative impact on residential property values of proximate residential properties. And the paired sales analysis demonstrates that this residential neighborhood is experiencing the same hyper increases in property values as the overall local, regional, state, and national housing market, further confirming that dissimilar proximate uses do not negatively impact residential property values. Here's some other comments in there with respect to zoning, what we can and cannot, should and should not consider it. He's an expert in planning and zoning and fiscal impacts. He has some other comments on that, some of which you've already heard. I won't repeat, but it's all in the report, and I'm referencing what he has in his last paragraph, major paragraph. So that's a Goldman in New York report done by Dr. Donald Poland. The next thing I'd like to bring to your attention is with respect to truck queuing. Those been handed out? Okay, thank you. We have an exhibit, one-page exhibit, 8.5 by 11 in front of you. With respect to that, at our private entrance, we relocated the truck gate approximately 50 feet to the east and have striped the 36-foot wide driveway to accommodate 3 lanes. That's one 12-foot lane outbound from our site, and this is only truck traffic we're referring to, and 2 12-foot lanes inbound, which can accommodate 8 tractor-trailer rigs waiting to go through the gate. So that's 2 lanes for each. We also have 109 trailer parking spaces and ample on-site drives and capacity for this facility. Once a tenant has been identified, and they have not been as yet, it will be their decision whether or not to have a gate at the entrance. There will be, and this for security, as you know, there will be less need for truck queuing if there were no gate. This is portrayed on a schematic plan that you have now, the 8.5 by 11, and that was just handed out by Mr. Wheeler. So that's the first thing. We've added capacity for queuing at the entrance drive, and we've significantly increased the queuing capabilities there and capacity, and we also still have many drives and tractor-trailer parking spaces and trailer spaces on site, and we're down to 109 because we gave up 2 at the southerly end of the trailer court as requested, so the trucks could turn around at the end of it, the southerly end. If you recall, we gave those 2 up, so we're down to 109. Also, connection to the trail system has been discussed a little bit of late. We have also submitted 2 schematic sheets, 8.5 by 11, which are in your package now in front of you, depicting a pedestrian connection from our site to the town open space off our southwest corner, which is on Edgewood Drive. We'll coordinate with town staff as to how this 4-foot stone dust path will connect through the open space to the existing trail system for Constitution Landing. Our employees will be able to walk over along our sidewalk on the east side of the building. Just go from the entrance or the parking areas along the east side of the building down to the southerly emergency vehicle access drive that's in the entire south side of the property, south of the building, to the storm dust path. This necessitated adding a short section of sidewalk at the southeast corner of the building, so there'll be interconnection to the emergency vehicle access drive for pedestrians. We also have added a sign directing employees to the new walking trail. We're offering to do this, and it will be implemented subject to the discretion of the commission. If you'd like it, we are willing to do that. That covers those items, and I believe the last one I have is with respect to acoustics, and I see Commissioner Wagner's on remotely. He had done his own quick little analysis, and the commission asked us to engage an acoustics expert to take a look at this facility and what impact it may have from the southerly end of the truck loading area, the truck court, to the closest residential property. Brooks Acoustics Corporation, that's Bennett Brooks, who's a licensed professional engineer and acoustics expert, was engaged to do that analysis. What's the impact on the closest part of that lot, the closest lot, which is 124 Edgewood Drive? That's the northwest corner of it, just the corner of it. What is the impact with respect to sound volume at that corner from operations at the loading dock? So I will just do a quick little summary, and I'll paraphrase what he said. But as requested, Brooks Acoustics Corporation has conducted a sound evaluation study for the proposed Talbot Lane Development Warehouse Project in South Windsor, Connecticut. As part of the study, and evaluation will be made of the potential sound generated by a truck at the proposed Talbot Lane Warehouse Development in South Windsor. This evaluation focused on the sound level at the nearest residential property line to the south. Those results were compared to provisions of the Town of South Windsor Noise Ordinance and the State of Connecticut Noise Regulations. The study was based on project design information supplied on the project, which are part of the planning and zoning application for the Talbot Lane development. Calculations of truck-generated sound at the southernmost loading dock position were made for the nearest residential property line. That's at 124 Edgewood Drive, again, the northwest corner of it. This analysis also included the beneficial effects of sound control design features, which are included in the facility design. The calculations included a 12-foot sound barrier wall next to the loading dock area and a 6-foot earthen berm and about 90 feet of vegetation and landscape plantings along the facility's southern property line. The maximum estimated sound level at the south residential property line from the truck activity is 43 decibels on the A scale. Significantly, this estimated sound level is below the regulatory limits for the Town of South Windsor and the State of Connecticut. Therefore, the truck is expected to be in compliance with regulatory requirements. I just want to skip to a final comment he said, and he indicated in his report on page 4. The proposed sound mitigation features are expected to provide significant reductions in sound levels from the truck loading dock to the south residential property line. It is important to note that the truck sound level will drop substantially for houses at greater distances. So what Mr. Bennett Brooks, PE and acoustical expert, acoustical engineer, is indicating is that this facility and the trucking operations at this facility on the westerly side will not exceed the sound levels that are in the town's noise ordinance, nor will it exceed the sound levels that are in the State of Connecticut sound statutes. We will be well below the sound levels for daytime, and as measured from the closest point of the closest residential lot, not from the house, just from the very corner, to the loading dock area. So we will be well below the daytime levels, which I believe is 61 decibels on the A scale, and then it's also well below the nighttime standard, which is, of course, quieter, you want it so people can sleep, which is, I believe, 51 decibels, the A scale, and we're at 43 according to his analysis. Taking into consideration those things we're doing, and bear in mind, it includes the 12-foot by 60-foot wooden sound barrier that we offered to do at the last hearing on November 9th. If you wish us to do that, that's what his analysis took into consideration. We've offered that.
Excuse me. Any discussions, please bring them out into the lobby. Thank you.
So we're meeting that standard by a fair margin, both nighttime and daytime. And it's done by a professional engineer, as Mr. Wagner is over here to our left on the screen, requested through the chair, by the commission, the request by the commission. So we are confident that we will, and as he indicated in the report, the farther you go away from that one point, the northwest corner 124 Edgewood, it will get lower and lower and lower. So, so only at that one point is it at that level. It will be reduced thereafter. So I think that's should put that particular item. You should be relatively satisfied with what we have. We have the expert that you wanted, and he took an analysis as requested by the chair and Mr. Wagner. And those are 5 items are all I have right now. We have Attorney Connor who'd like to do summation remarks at the conclusion after we've heard from the commission and from the public, is I guess a protocol for that. He'd like to do that at that time, so we can make any formal summary with respect to any other testimony that's given. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll turn to our town staff, our Director of Planning, Michelle Light.
Thank you. So you did receive a lot of new information both today and in your packets there as far as changes to the plans. The only thing I didn't see that I know we had discussed, and I'm not sure what the applicant's intent is or the commission's, was some interplanting in the 50-foot buffer area. So that's something that the commission may want to talk a little bit further about. They did put the conservation easement over the bermed area like they were talking about. The other thing I was asked to look into a little bit at the last meeting was Governor's Highway and some concerns expressed back in the 90s of what town council may have done related to Governor's Highway. I did do some digging in the record. I guess what I can present is in the late 80s, you know, there was a concern with truck traffic, and there was some efforts on the town's part with the chamber and whatnot to kind of bring people together and get truck traffic to be limited. About 90, there was a petition to the town council to try to put a cul-de-sac on Governor's Highway. At that time, there was a CROG study just quickly that, you know, kind of determined that it would have impacts if you were to do that. And then the next action really I could find was in 2005 when the ordinance that was on the books today was put into place. So I think we kind of have a long-standing history of truck problem on Governor's Highway. And with that, I'm going to let Mr. Doolittle tell you what we hope to do long-term wise looking at that situation. Thank you.
Okay, we'll turn to our town engineer, Jeff Doolittle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So no other comments on this application, but with regard to the comments / complaints about truck traffic on Governor's Highway, what the town would propose is to, if the neighborhood is amenable to it, engage them in a traffic calming study and look at the traffic on Governor's Highway, including trucks, and come up with some measures that would discourage trucks from using Governor's Highway, particularly the eastern portion, which is residential. You know, that can include a variety of different items. As we've discussed, the trucks can't be prohibited outright from Governor's Highway, but we can certainly discourage them from doing that and make sure we're slowing traffic down so it's not as impactful on the residents.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'll turn to members of the public. I'm going to have it opened with Ms. Kerrigan from 1838 Main Street. And I just want to remind the public, we will be doing 3 minutes per person. And if you have more to say after that time limit, we'll be glad to call on you after everybody else has spoken. So, thank you.
Is this on?
Yes, it is.
I'd like to start by saying congratulations to each of you in the recent election, and thank you for stepping forward and being willing to serve. It's a big job. Thanks. I'm here tonight to tell you that noise is making me a little crazy. Traffic noise, to be exact, and the traffic noise that has permeated my backyard and my neighbors' backyards is eating away at the quality of life. We used to enjoy one truck, one motorcycle, and one drag race at a time. We bought our home on Main Street in 1982, a stone's throw away from the juncture of Sullivan Avenue and Route 5. The neighborhood was peaceful and quiet, idyllic really, and much of South Windsor was back then. Fast forward to life on Main Street now. Aldi, FedEx, Mobis, Vistar, multiple trucking companies lining Sullivan Avenue, the recent additions of Coca-Cola, Home Depot, and Amazon distribution centers. We're all learning to live with traffic and noise, but at what cost? Our property and the properties in our immediate neighborhood have been literally transformed by the noise generated by traffic. Steve Wagner was a witness to that, sitting in my backyard trying to have a conversation. The background noise is relentless. The impulse noise of accelerating and jake-braking trucks has become torture. Planning and Zoning is reviewing yet another application for another distribution center. I've been following this saga closely through meeting minutes, and I commend the commissioners for their willingness to engage in frank discussions with advocates and foes alike, to ask difficult questions and to do your best with the quality life versus financial health issues of the town. This distribution center on Talbot Lane, just off Governor's Highway, is a bad idea, and I'll tell you why. It will severely and permanently impact the tranquility of multiple neighborhoods. Noise finds a way to permeate, penetrate, and bounce around. Berming and tree planting and landscaping and water features provide no protection from noise. The fact of the matter is, noise is extremely difficult to control or reduce. Contiguous 12 to 14-foot acoustic fencing may offer some relief, but at great expense. We have noise ordinances in place based on state standards. Distribution center truck noise appears to be an exception to those ordinances. I haven't been able to confirm that. So bottom line, we the people who live in neighborhoods abutting distribution centers or not have virtually no protection other than that provided by the town's own zoning regulations. We need you to protect the people and neighborhoods here in town. It's too late for my neighborhood. It's not too late for Cody Circle and surrounding neighborhoods. If the developers of Talbot Lane meet current zoning regulations, the project will likely be approved.
Excuse me?
I urge the commissioners to find something in those regulations that will protect people who are about to have their neighborhoods and their lives transformed.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. If you have more, please, no outbursts. Thank you. Attorney John Parks, please.
Good evening, Attorney John Parks. I was here at the last long meeting, and at that time I submitted a document which I found helpful in organizing both myself and focusing the application onto the town's regulation, and it was solely focused on really your table, let's see here, 4.1.1A, permitted commercial and industrial uses. And I won't go back into that, that speaks for itself. I have prepared an additional document which I've entitled Supplemental Compliance with Regulations, which is dated today. And I've given Michelle Leip a copy. We're waiting for Derek Butler to sign the piece that he authored, but I'm going to summarize it, and he's promised to be here before the end of the meeting, I'll have him sign it, and I'll submit it for the part of the record. But basically, as I did in the November 9th regulation, and as I've done for years, I studied your regulation. I studied the plan and the submission. Of course, I haven't seen the most recent submissions, but again, I tried to focus not on the personal impact, but on your regulation and its requirements. And I start with section 2.1, compliance with the provision of the regulations, and no building or structure is to be used, occupied, and no building thereof or structure shall be erected, essentially except in the conformity with your regulations. And this, 9-acre warehouse is not in conformance with your regulation, and I'm adding to the reasons that I gave on November 9th. Number one, your regulation 4.1.6A includes a table which deals with lot coverage, and in an industrial zone, your lot coverage is 50%. This
We're going to give you additional time because you are representing a good amount of people that are
Thank you.
Included in this. So, thank you.
And in the supplemental compliance and attached to it, which will be submitted as soon as Mr. Butler arrives, is 3 affidavits and some diagrams. And one of the diagrams is attached to an affidavit signed by an engineer who is not only an engineer but also a resident of the town of South Windsor. And essentially, before these recent changes, which we haven't seen, his calculation was that impervious surface is 54%. So in terms of compliance with regulations, in addition to the issues raised on November 9th, we have the fact that the application doesn't comply with 4.1.6A. The board has the right to request an independent traffic study, and I would certainly urge that, especially in light of the fact that at the November 9th meeting, representations were made that, and especially specifically in relation to one of your board members' requests, and it was Commissioner Bernstein on November 9th, 2021, at hour 4:40, and he was responding to representations by both the representative of Langen Engineering and other members of the applicant's staff, that the Office of State Traffic Administration had approved this plan. And I've attached a transcript of your November 9th meeting, and of course that's available in part of the record, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 representations that would lead a reasonable person to believe from what was said that it had been approved, and in fact, it has not been approved. And I have attached to my compliance with regulation the printout from the website for the Office of State Traffic Administration that indicates this application is in the category of pending. So why I bring it up and mention Commissioner Bernstein is the exchange by the Langen Engineering is that, and by Mr. DeMalley, was that we don't need an independent traffic study because the state approval is in effect independent traffic study, but the state approval has not been granted. And so Commissioner Bernstein said, are you saying that the third party corroborated? And then Langen Engineering said, yes. Well, that's not exactly what the thing is, and I'll let the board make their own determination on that. But it's certainly an independent traffic consultant is certainly something that's happened in this town in the past, and I gave a cite to a well-recognized land use treatise that allows it. In addition to my supplemental compliance with regulation, a second engineer who, actually two more engineers that are both engineers and residents have taken issue with the failure of the applicant to comply with section 6.6 of your regulation. And I won't try to play engineer because I'm certainly not one, but they have signed sworn affidavits based on their expertise as engineers as to not only the failure of the application to address these issues, but the specifics that I guess only engineers understand as to why that is. Additionally, your sound ordinance, which I understand is a town ordinance, section 50-61 and subsequent sections of that. And as I understand it, the residential receptor zone is 55 decibels by day and 45 decibels by night. I can't imagine how that will be complied with, and I will make a point, and certainly I'm no match for the Brook report, and I'm not a sound engineer. However, I believe if you look at that report, you'll find that that is analyzed based on one truck. We have 100 trucks. So I don't know how sound works, if that's 100 times more, but clearly that's a concern of my clients. It's a regulation with the town, and it needs to be complied with. I understand that Mr. Butler has prepared a little 2-minute soundbite with him by the tractor trailers that he apparently operates, and the top of the pipes is 13.5 feet high. The source height for your for that Brook report is 8 feet high, And, you know, that doesn't take into account that there are essentially two-story houses. I'll let the engineers explain how sound travels, but, you know, the report is measured by hearing 5 feet off of the ground. Even I'm taller than that, but if I was in my second story of my house, I would be higher. So I think the report is deficient and flawed, and I think that the board needs to, you know, compare this regulation that you have in place, which I think is adequate to evaluate this particular site, and the applicant bears that burden. And, you know, I pointed out, you know, a number of deficiencies in that, and hopefully Mr. Butler will show up, I mean, and we'll submit that. But essentially, at the end of the day, this is the town of South Windsor. It's not, it's your town, and the reason for commission members is that you have your own experiences, including tractor trailers on highways and trucks, and you know your roads better than some outsider coming to town and talking to you about it. You know your neighborhoods, and in my opinion, just applying the facts of this application to the regulation, it's not a good fit. And it's not just a process of putting round pegs in round holes. I mean, in my opinion, this is a square peg, and we're trying to fit it in a round hole. And if it complies with your regulation, that's one thing. But I've got, you know, at least a half a dozen areas where it hasn't complied, and I think the board needs to evaluate it. I think the board needs to, and I expect you're going to close the public hearing portion of it tonight, but the board needs to carefully evaluate all of, and it's a tsunami of information that you've received, and make that determination. I will submit my supplemental compliance to be part of the record, and I believe that there is some other new information coming behind me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Parks, just so I understand, everything you said so far was verbally, and you're expecting
Derek
that...
Butler. So I've been working with him by phone and by email.
Yep.
And he sent me his, so how does that work? His, does it
Presentation, or...
come on?
Will we be getting a copy of this? Or?
Yes, excuse me, I wanted to have it signed by all the people, so I have a copy, Michelle has a copy, signed by all the, what I'm going to call expert testimony, which is what I don't possess, the expertise. And one of our experts in trucking is Derek Butler. You've heard from him, but I think it's easier to evaluate this in the printed form, and I think there was a misunderstanding that by him, but in any event, he's on the way. So how does this work?
Yeah, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand what's going on and the commissioners understand. And we do have letters to read into the record, so
This will
we're
be
willing to come
a couple
back to it
minutes.
when
My
he
understanding
does
is it's
arrive.
2 minutes.
Okay,
Oh, 1 minute.
sure, whatever.
So he's on his way now?
I believe that's unknown
Good
at
morning.
this time, so,
Standing up on a step ladder now, just to show you the stack height on a tractor. It's about 13, 4 inches high, curved up so the exhaust. Exhaust goes up. Just wanted to show you what that looks. Good morning. I'm standing up on a step ladder now, just to show you the stack height on a tractor. It's about 13, 4 inches high, curved up so the exhaust goes up. Just wanted to show you what that looks like. Of trees and a 13-foot buffer is no match for 75 of these.
That's all I have, but I would like the ability to submit these compliances once he physically comes into the room and signs them.
okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll hear from Mayor Liz Pendleton.
Good evening. I'm not here this evening as Mayor Liz Pendleton. I'm here as Liz Pendleton, resident of 319 Hilton Drive, concerning this development that affects my neighbors and myself and my neighborhood. I'm here to speak as a resident and neighbors to so many who have already spoken against this. I stand with them with their concerns. I watched the meetings from home, stayed up till 12:30 in the morning with the rest of you. I cried with the dad from Cody's Circle, who has a special needs daughter. I heard my neighbor share the concern about the lack of sleep due to the lights and the noise. I share the same concerns about tractor trailers using residential roads and the impact that these will have. I myself was almost killed at the corner of Governors in Ellington by a 54-foot trailer in a queen-size cab that took Ellington onto Governors and missed my truck by inches. I followed him, called the police, and was shaking horribly and was crying. And the police told me to stay in my truck, which I did, thank goodness. But yes, and he talked to that driver of that truck. That driver of that truck, it was a Canadian truck from Canada. I called the company, and they said to me he didn't know where he was going. But that makes it okay to drive through Governor's Highway in residential. And all I have to say, at what cost of human life, peace, safety, and health to the residents of South Windsor is this worth? At what cost? So I repeat, I stand with my neighbors and their concerns who have spoken out against this, and I am against this development in our area, in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stephen King.
Caitlin, can I borrow you for a moment?
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening to the commissioners. As Liz said, I am not here as the deputy mayor of South Windsor. My name is Stephen King Jr. I live at 926 Ellington Road in South Windsor, Connecticut. I am a resident of South Windsor, and I'm speaking as such. My family and I live right around the corner from this potential facility, and for those who aren't familiar with our address, we live diagonal from the mill on the river on the same road as Coke, as Amazon, and as Home Depot. Fortunately for our family, my wife Cam and my two children, Roman, age 11, and Sophia, age 16, we live way down the street from those companies. However, we still feel the impact of those companies via the trucks they utilize, whether it's their noise, their speed going down the street, etc. As the tractors, trailers travel up and down Ellington Road from the early morning through the late evening. I rise this evening in solidarity with my fellow neighbors, with my South Windsor family who are against this application for this facility to be built on Talbot Lane. I rise because I understand that having children that just want to go out and play in their neighborhood and their parents who don't want to have to worry about them getting hit while they're just playing stick hockey, if they still do that, in the street or just hanging out in front of their house in their own neighborhood. I'm 48 years old. We used to do that as kids all the time, and it brought families and communities together because of it. I rise to speak out against this application to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I ask them to also stand in solidarity with your tax-paying neighbors as well and vote this application down unanimously, as this is what your electorate has asked you to do. Now, for reference sake, this would not be the first time that even in recent history that a Planning and Zoning Commission in Connecticut has taken a stand and rejected the building of a major facility that has come before them. There is a precedent, as recent as this past September when the Planning and Zoning Commission in Wallingford told Amazon no. The commission told a developer that they were denying their application to build a 219,000 square foot, 17-dock Amazon building and parking lot. Now, to help our own commissioners, those Wallingford commissioners cited traffic issues as a major concern in their vote, which has also come up a number of times from our South Windsor family as well as a reason that they're in opposition. Let me be clear. I'm all about small businesses. I'm all for the economic development of our community as it relates to the positive growth of our town for the betterment of its families' futures. I'm for smart growth, not just for financial reasons, but because there's a vision for a sustainable future that benefits everyone involved. However, right now, this application in this location on Talbot does not speak enough to the positive economic development of our business for us having a safe place for our neighbors to continue to live and flourish. Now, perhaps in another part of our town that may lend itself to be redeveloped, I'm not here to be built from scratch. In closing, I ask our commission to consider this. There's a huge difference between being right and doing right. So I ask the commission, please do the right thing our South Windsor family is asking you to do and vote down this application. Thank you for your time.
Order. Order. If the applause continues, I can clear the room. I'd rather not. Please remain orderly. Thank you. Okay. I will hear from other members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this application.
Oh, in favor.
In favor? Hearing and seeing none. Members who would like to speak against this application, and I'll remind the residents to try not to repeat anything that's already been presented previously.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Holizak. I am an engineer by training and profession. I've lived at 39 Cody Circle for 27 years, in town for 29 years. I've been an engineer for 35 years. My resume that's coming in the packet will include information that I worked on jet engine exhausts and attenuation of energy in those exhausts through both materials and component fabrication techniques. I've only had about an hour to study the Brooks report, but I have the following concerns. The first and most important is that the Brooks acoustic study appears not to recognize that the federal motor highway data for truck sound is already A-weighted. And Commissioner Wagner may know more about this than some of you, but their analysis appears to A-weight the data a second time, which has the effect of reducing the total sound energy. That's very, very concerning to me that this was done. There was only one receiver. I believe Commissioner Wagner asked for 2 different receiver sites to be analyzed. As mentioned, the receiver height is 5 feet. There's a number of people that are taller than 5 feet. There's a 6-foot berm, so that affects the sight line for the sound. There are a number of 2-story houses, and federal law requires that the 66 dBA at open window includes 2nd-story open windows, not just a 5-foot height. The source, the truck, was right next to the fence, the barrier in the report. That's the most efficient position, especially given that their source height was only 8 feet. You've already seen from Derek Butler, the stacks are 13.5 feet. There's also a motor source for the noise. Perhaps they average the 2, but I think that's a bit unfair. If you were to move the truck 50 or 75 feet or 100 feet away from the barrier, that's the fence, you would get a significantly different result for sure. The fence becomes less and less efficient because you get different sight lines, different ways for the sound energy to bounce around. That's all I have right now. There's some additional comments in the packet. You can review those at your leisure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against this application? Please step forward.
Good evening. My name is Gerald Bittner. I live at 24 Cody Circle. My wife and I built that house in 1994. My kids used to play in these fields and hike back there and get all sorts of bugs and things like that. It seems like almost every year this town is buying open space for this exact same reason. Why wouldn't we consider buying this? It's more residential than commercial. The other thing I would just want to point out, many of us have been to the new Costco that just opened up. I believe that's 140-some thousand square feet. It's massive. This is more than twice that size. This is just way too big to be surrounded on 2.5 sides by residential. It just doesn't make sense to put it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Lady in the back. And if I might remind the public, you're welcome to sign before or after.
Okay. My name is Jessica Glass. I live at 1837 Main Street, and I'm speaking from the perspective of the many people who have been living through this. We have 2 distribution centers that were built 6 years ago on Sullivan Avenue right across from where we live. Main Street comes into Route 5, and so that, therefore, we're subject to a lot of noise that comes from Route 5. I have a lot to say about this from my perspective, but I want to read something that my neighbor wrote. She couldn't be here tonight. She lives on 1832 John Fitch Boulevard, also known as Route 5. And my name is Cherish Lizet. I live at 1832 John Fitch Boulevard, also known as Route 5. The increased truck traffic in our town has changed so much in the last 6 years that our home is anything but peaceful. The FedEx trucks are always running the red lights at the Sullivan Avenue intersection, making our street 10 times more deadly every day. The Jake brakes that we hear at 2 a.m. wake us up on a nightly basis. We can hear the humming of the truck engines from MassCon and Vistar all night and cannot sleep with our windows open in the spring. I now sleep with earplugs every night. Why am I telling you all this if I don't live near the new proposed industrial building? I'm telling you this because I don't wish anyone, in all caps, in our town to live with the constant noise that we live with day and night. There is currently a recessed manhole cover in front of our house that trucks go over all the time, causing our house to shake and is forming cracks in our walls. If there are any potholes anywhere near the new proposed building, the increased truck traffic will cause an entire neighborhood to shake like my house does. I would truly hate to see another area of our town become polluted with exhaust, fumes, truck noise, and shaking homes for another industrial commercial building. Please don't make an entire neighborhood live like we do. Thank you, Cherish Lizet. And I just want to add, 6 years ago when we were told that the truck noise proposed for the Vistar and Mobis distribution centers would be within legal limits and definitely would not reach residents of Main Street. That unfortunately has proven to be not true. All I have to say about the noise has been said before, so I'll just add that police reports also show that the intersection between the 17-lane intersection at the corner of Sullivan and Route 5 now has 3 times the number of traffic accidents than any other intersection in town. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against at this time? Gentleman with the, oh. After this lady and the gentleman who rose, will read some letters into the record.
Hi, good evening. Cynthia St. Cyr. I grew up in this town. I live on Ferry Lane right now, but grew up on Governor's Highway. Hi, Kevin. Went to school with Kevin. Love this town, but lately, with all the new Coca-Cola, Amazon, now this coming through, it's not fair to the young families in this town and for the people that have worked hard and all their lives to own their home, to have this happen to them. It's just not fair. My family still lives on Governor's Highway, and I have 2 nephews raising a new family. And I beg of you to not do the right thing and don't have this come through. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to young families. I appreciate the time, but don't, please. I beg of you.
Okay, thank you very much. A gentleman in back with the blue coat.
Dear Commissioners, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak out about our concerns.
You could speak more into the microphone.
Yeah. My name is Wei Zhan. I live at 125 Cody Circle. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. Tonight I want to speak about 2 comments. First one is about the traffic study. If you remember, in the previous public hearing about 2 weeks ago, when the applicant's traffic engineer was asked about the exact date of the traffic data collection, he answered as June 6th, okay? June 6th is a Sunday. You can't do a study on Sunday to get a weekend date. And there's also no school bus on Sunday, okay? That's one simple fact. But he never included the exact date in the report. So I don't know, how to interpret this. And the second concern is about the this so-called noise study, acoustic study, whatever, that was just posted today. I didn't have time to go through that yet, but based on what I've heard from the applicants, the study was based on some like a model or theoretical calculations. But there's a better way to do that. And as a matter of fact, there's a existing similar study in that nearby location. I don't know if you all remember at Calas Pasta, there's actually a fuel cell unit, okay? And several years ago, when the fuel cell unit was constructed, there's a very thorough acoustic study that was done by another engineering company. And that report is available online from the state of Connecticut. I believe they are required to do that study by the state to get some permit, but I didn't have time to print it yet. But that study was a combination of both theoretical calculation and field test. They actually put some speakers on site and measure the noise level at a different distance, like measure the noise level at the properties on Governor's Highway. So I believe that's a better way to describe the noise impact rather than the rather than a model or formulas only, because I'm an engineer. We all know your result all depends on your assumption and your effectors. There are many ways to fudge or to twist, many ways to fudge or adjust your model. But test is always it's a better method. And I think that fuel cell project provides a very good reference to the acoustic study. And I don't know if I can send a digital file to you. It's available online, that study. I didn't print it.
Okay. Excuse me, your 3 minutes is up. Did you have anything more we could?
No.
Okay.
I'm done.
You're welcome to come back up later.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we'll read some letters into the record. We have our interim secretary, Commissioner Dexter, but Commissioner Cavagnero will do the first one.
All right, I have 4 emails here. I'll read off right in a row. I'll start off with a letter from Brian, or an email from Brian Faraci. Hi, Ms. Leip. I would like to express my support for the proposed warehouse at 25 Talbot Lane. The land in question is zoned for such use, and there are other similar structures nearby. The project is close to Route 5, which can handle increased truck traffic, and the Inland Wetlands Commission has approved this project. I am aware of interveners who are trying to stop the project, but so far their arguments against the project have been unpersuasive to me. As long as reasonable mitigation efforts can be put in place to shield nearby homeowners from negative effects of such a project, the proposal should be approved. Thank you, Brian Faraci, November 22nd, 2021. Next letter I have is from Allison Poulin. Over the course of the planning and zoning meetings and in reading the bios of some of the planning and zoning commissioners, it is clear, understandably, that this commission does a comprehensive review of all industrial proposed projects in town to determine the impact on our residents in town. As we all have seen and heard, 0% of the surrounding neighborhood support the building of this 360,000 square foot mega warehouse off Governor's Highway, and 100% of the surrounding neighborhood vehemently opposes the building of this mega warehouse in the middle of our neighborhood for a wide variety of reasons. The negative effects have been identified but not limited to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, truck noise, warehouse sound, 24/7 pollution, 24/7 truck traffic invading our neighborhood roads, and water runoff issues that will affect our neighbors between the proposed site and Old Main Street. Further, the result will be a massive expense of the town that includes the ongoing repair costs of road wear and tear on Governor's Highway and the likely widening of Governor's Highway that will eventually have to be done to accommodate this surge of heavy truck traffic. Being a town-owned road, this cost will be shared by all South Windsor residents. Also, local realtors have indicated property value reductions will occur of between $30,000 to $80,000 in nearby neighborhoods. And finally, after the most recent negative media coverage, in addition to the overall numerous negative effects mentioned impacting the quality of life to residents of surrounding neighborhoods, can you honestly vote and say yes, that this project will have a positive impact on our neighborhood and community? With 6 question marks. The next letter I have is from Robert Poulin. Dear Planning and Zoning Commissioners, I'm writing this letter with the intent that it will be read and submitted into the record at the next Planning and Zoning meeting. Thank you all for your volunteer service to the great town of South Windsor. It is appreciated. I am writing regarding the ongoing issue with the proposed distribution warehouse proposed for construction on Governor's Highway and Talbot Road, which I'm vehemently against. I have watched and or attended most of the last 3 meetings that this topic was discussed and extended due to the criticality of this issue. I am glad the last 3 meetings that this topic was discussed and I am glad that everyone has come to realize that the decision should not be rushed and should be thoroughly debated and researched. It really is that important. There are many facets that play into determining the final decision, and they all need to be considered. For me, the bottom line is something that I keep hearing reference to, and that is the quality of life. There isn't one thing about this proposal that I have heard that does anything to increase or maintain the South Windsor residents' quality of life. This project flat out decreases the quality of life for the many residents who surround the proposed building site and neighborhoods on 3 sides. From exhaust, noise pollution, lighting, traffic congestion, pedestrian safety, as well as an inadequate Governor's Highway road, which is not built for this kind of traffic. The answer should actually be easy when I think about the location of the site and the many negatives impacting the surrounding neighborhoods. One of the things that the council seems to be struggling with is the fact that the property is zoned as industrial, but that does not mean it is zoned for anything industrial to be built on the site. I am sure that the site is more appropriate for some other industrial application other than the monstrosity of the distribution warehouse. Should it be zoned industrial? I think everyone knows the answer is no. However, apparently there is nothing that can be done about that now. We can only work with what we have in hand, so let's do that. Let's work with what we have and realize that this is industrial zone, but it is not appropriate for the huge distribution warehouse proposed on this industrial site, and vote the project down. I urge you all to please put a stop to this potential huge mistake, which will undisputedly cause a degradation in the quality of life to the residents of South Windsor. Thank you for your time, Robert Poulin. Last letter I have is from John Drenga. I apologize if I mispronounced it. Dear Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm asking that you decline the application for 25 Talbot Lane because it fails to meet the most basic of planning requirements. That is, it violates the public safety. Note that this facility will be less than a football field from the residents' backyards and will produce heavy truck traffic on residential roads lined with houses less than 100 feet from the street. The truck emissions and noise pollution from a site this close to a residential neighborhood will produce levels that are scientifically proven to be hazardous. Health hazards includes mental health. This includes interrupted sleep, as this is a 24/7 operation, as well as physical health, including cancer, lung disease, and heart disease. See American Cancer Society website for more scientific details. Thanks, John Drenga, 144 Edgewood Drive.
I am writing to express my opposition to the freight terminal at 25 Talbot Lane. You may wonder why I am opposed, since I live a distance from Talbot Lane, but this development would negatively affect all of us in town. South Windsor is being inundated with these types of massive businesses and warehouses: Home Depot, Amazon, Coca-Cola, many others. Many parts of town, especially the southern part, are becoming unbearable with all the truck traffic, not just from local warehouses in town, but by Hartford distributors on Chapel Road, in Manchester, Amazon, on Long Hill Street in East Hartford, and many others that take shortcuts on our town's local roads to get to 291. We, the South Windsor taxpayers, are the ones left with the bills for road maintenance. It is unthinkable to additionally add this terminal traffic to our town's already overcrowded roads. It is definitely not what the town's residents and taxpayers want. I do not want the first thing that people think of when they hear South Windsor is all our distribution centers and warehouses with their truck traffic instead of our beautiful historic areas, parks, trails, and many other amenities that make us the 12th best place to live in the United States per Money Magazine. I know the commission will do the right thing for our South Windsor residents. This is from Gary Pitcock on Long Hill Road. Hello, I'm writing to advise you of my husband and I's opposition to the planning and zoning application of 25 Talbot Lane. As a lifelong resident, I'm greatly disappointed by the planning decisions that are being made in our town. This is not Manchester. This is not East Hartford. Just stop. We are ruining this town. The tractor-trailer traffic, FedEx trucks, Amazon trucks are everywhere. As a Main Street resident, we are frequently impacted by road closures and accidents on Route 5 and the adjoining streets. Speeding vehicles, traffic already impacting our area as we are becoming recognized as a cut-through. Please stop the building. What happened to open space and land preservation? So disappointed in our town if another stupid warehouse project passes. Carrie Morse, 1455 Main Street. This one is from Linda Levesque Dalp. She's at 1090 Main Street. I've lived in my homestead, originally 15 acres, for the past 68 years. My father farmed our land all the way to the woods, comprising what was known as the Smith Lot and Ludlam Lot. He dug out the pond that was at the end of the Ludlam Lot, which he used for irrigation, and is now the property of Karen McComber. There was never a problem getting to the back of the land. There was a culvert located on the Jones property, recognized today as the nursing home property, beyond our property line, where the stream trickled through on its way to Newberry Road. As kids, we were able to walk and ride over the culvert on the path to head up the hill to get to Route 5. The land was never wet on either lot. My first concern with the proposal of yet another distribution facility in South Windsor, it's about water runoff, which I am very sure will impact our property. I'm suspect of this proposed water study, having seen Newberry Road flooded, where the water went up to the second floor windows on the house at the end of Newberry Road. In the past 40 years, our back land has progressively gotten wetter and wetter, so much so that often we cannot even walk on our back land without sinking knee-deep above our ankles or the tractor getting stuck. The culvert that diverted water has rotted through. There is little flowing water, and it becomes a sopping mess until the rains accumulate, cannot replace the culvert to help keep the water moving. This past summer, the amount of rain flooded streams, saturated the land. There was simply nowhere for the water to go. My second concern is for the amount of traffic that will be added to Route 5. I'm not alone, having to sit at the traffic light, Route 5 northbound, unable to take a right or left onto Chapel Road as I waited for 22 minutes for the light to turn while the train picks up and drops off cars at the new distribution centers. I've counted 20-plus FedEx trucks racing down Route 5 as I waited at that same light to cross Route 5. Every single time I cross Route 5, I wait a full minute after the light turns green because of cars and trucks running red lights. I'm not alone in this observation. I hesitate to mention how many accidents have occurred at these intersections. And third concern is the spill-out traffic that will impact Main Street. Cars trying to avoid the condensed traffic on Route 5 will use Main Street as an alternate route. Was it just a week ago that traffic was diverted onto Main Street after an accident at Strong Road closed Route 5 for hours? Main Street is already a popular place for individuals and families with children to walk, ride bikes, enjoy the historic old road. My neighbor walks daily, counts the unusual amount of cars that seem to have business on Main Street when there is no longer a town hall, community hall, elementary school, high school, or a small grocery store on the street. My grandchildren live on this street, and I worry about their safety at being able to walk or ride 1 mile up the street. I can certainly empathize with the neighbors that are going to be close to this facility. quality of life in South Windsor is dramatically changing with all of these distribution centers. And the last letter I have is from Mark Kozakowski, 863 Clark Street. I'm writing in regards to site plan application 21-36P for Talbot Lane and Governor's Highway. I'd like to thank the Commission for its thorough review and holding a public hearing on this application. As a site plan review, I both encourage and expect the Commission to fully scrutinize this application for compliance with the zoning regulations and consider all testimony that is pertinent in this review. I also like to thank the public who had come out to speak on this application. The public outcry is loud, passionate, and cannot be ignored by the Commission, the applicant, or any prospective tenant or owner of this property. Concerns over the impact on the neighborhood are real. We heard public testimony expressing concern about the impacts of the development and use of the property on neighborhood streets, natural habitats, and health and quality of life for nearby residents. Applying only antiquated zoning criteria for a project with impacts of this magnitude is disconcerting, to say the least. If approved, I can only hope that the future owner understands how this proposal has tormented its neighbors, even before a single shovel hit the ground or a truck transversed the street. I further hope they recognize the need to make amends with the very community it has chosen to be a part of. Thank you.
Commissioner Viteri?
Thank you. The first letter I have is from Kimberly Owen. Dear South Windsor Planning and Zoning Committee, I, Kim Owen of 104 Judy Lane, am in firm opposition to the 25 Talbot Lane warehouse project. As my daughter represents the youngest member of the neighborhood affected and cannot yet talk, I have to be her voice, her security, and protector. She is only 5 months old and certainly did not choose to grow up next to a 24/7 trucking operation. There have been numerous studies, see attached, that show the adverse effects on children within 1,000 feet of industrial trucking operations. If my husband and I stay in our house, which we have worked very hard to fully own, we will be putting our daughter's health at risk. These studies also show adverse health effects on pregnancy outcomes, which is highly concerning if we choose to have another child. In good conscience, we cannot remain where we thought we would be forever, will be our forever home, and will likely need to move out of South Windsor, a town we love and chose to move to for its rural, quaint feel, while remaining less than 20 minutes from our work offices in Hartford. How we can even be considering having a warehouse be built within 2/3 of the neighbors being residential is extremely concerning. This would be the first warehouse of such built this close to hundreds of houses in the entire state of Connecticut. South Windsor is a town, not a city, and this should not even be a discussion. Please think about the ramifications and impact your decision will have on the current residents of this town. Thank you for all you do for this town and for reading this comment into the public record. My second letter comes from Amy Costa. My name is Amy Costa, and I live within 500 feet of the proposed facility. I've lived in South Windsor for over 35 years and on Edgewood Drive for the last 11. At the last meeting, I submitted a statement regarding my extreme concern for the physical and mental well-being of all the residents in the abutting neighborhoods, including that of my young children. Since then, I came upon a notice released by this commission which read in part, "It is our role to protect public health, well-being, and our natural environment while providing economic opportunity, and that its goals and strategies will uphold the high quality of life that our residents expect." With the abundance of evidence provided by various members of the community regarding the health detriments caused by excessive noise, diesel fumes, and traffic safety concerns, I believe it should be a clear decision for this commission to deny the application. A facility of this size has no place in an area where it is 75% surrounded by residential homes. Some berms, bushes, and a few feet between this size operation and people's homes will provide little to no refuge for the deluge of noise and increased pollution. And the noise will be nonstop with a facility we've been told will operate 24/7, 365. Add to that the pollution coming from the fumes of hundreds of diesel trucks frequenting the facility each and every day. What does that mean for the health of the neighboring residents? One of my children already suffers from significant pulmonary issues. How are these pollutants going to impact her? With COVID, our backyard has been a small refuge, and this facility will take that away from her. We will be stuck indoors, windows closed, fans and sound machines on to try to survive this torture the applicant is proposing on us. and I don't throw out the term torture lightly here. Merriam-Webster defines torture in part as something that causes agony or pain, anguish of body or mind. This is exactly what will be inflicted upon the neighboring residents being exposed to constant noise and pollution from a facility of this magnitude just feet from our homes. I implore this commission to do the right thing for the community which it serves, protect us, your neighbors, friends, and family, and deny this application. Thank you. My last letter comes from Annette Pasick, the president of the Hartford Audubon Society. Dear Chairman Pasconis, P&Z Commissioners, and Town Planner alike, I am writing on behalf of the Hartford Audubon Society, which is a vibrant, all-volunteer conservation organization in Hartford County. We own and manage the HAS Nature Preserve at 621 Main Street, known as Station 43. This preserve is located in the Connecticut River floodplain and is one of the most productive inland bird watching sites in Connecticut. It is also a special focus area of the Silvio Conti National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. 10 endangered, 9 threatened, and 9 special concern bird species have been reported there, among 229 total bird species. Section 43 comprises 9.1 acres of shallow pond and marsh, bordered by over 400 acres of wetland, meadows, and active farmland on our south, west, and north boundaries, and by 100 acres of wooded higher ground to the east. The trail entrance for the property is directly opposite where Newberry Road intersects with Main Street. We are writing to express our serious concern about the potential for increased stormwater drainage from the proposed new development at 25 Talbot Lane, application 21-36P. The extensive impervious surface proposed for the development, coupled with the limited on-site stormwater detention areas, could adversely affect our preserve. We ask the Commission to carefully examine the developer's revised stormwater management plan and ensure that there will be no net increase in discharge from their property. We thank you for your careful review of this application.
Does that complete all the letters to be read into the record? Okay. I'll turn to the public once more. Is there anybody else who would like to speak against this application? Gentleman with the light-colored shirt.
William Grondin, 38 Elizabeth Street. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Wagner, if he's still there. First off, in the hearing from the 9th, I noted the exhibits to the minutes were lacking a deed, 16, volume 1616, and page 318 and 319. I also included that in the current packet that I submitted yesterday to the planning office. So, I don't know if you've all had an opportunity to review that. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Please do your 3 minutes, and
okay, fine.
if the
That's
commission
fine.
has questions, we'll get back to you.
Certainly. Regarding the sewage on the attachment, I call your attention to the South Windsor subdivision regulations. C.4. Water supply, excuse me, letter C. It says, for all proposals, extensions to existing public water systems or the installation of dry pipes shall be approved by official designated water company, in this case MDC. D is, if proposal for private wells, the town's environmental health officer shall determine the feasibility of such wells. And I move to C.5, sanitary sewers. Connection, number B, connection to public sanitary sewer system. The superintendent of pollution control should be contacted early in the subdivision planning process for determination of feasibility of public sewage and the WPCA approval. The land in question is a subdivision that received approval from this committee in 1994, and the applicant currently has not complied with this regulation. So the application is incomplete. Further, the site plan that the applicant has submitted as of the 17th of this month inaccurately depicts the lots. The map that's going around is from the town GIS, and I think the town engineer and the planning director would agree with me that the GIS is not a legal document. Next is from the assessor's office. 475 Governor's Highway is listed as 3.87 acres, and that ties into the subdivision map, which shows it as a rectangular parcel, not as a triangular parcel, as the applicant shows on his plan. And that would be sheet 2. You'll notice that he shows of the applicant's plan, shows the elimination of property lines, and he shows it as a triangular parcel when in fact it's a rectangular parcel, and again ties into the subdivision map of 1994 that was approved by this committee, by this commission. And so it's inaccurately depicted on his subdivision map, on his site plan. And I don't, so questions later? Or?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. John?
Sorry, since I didn't run out the clock before, I realized I forgot a point. We've obviously been calling around to find people to do our own sound studies on behalf of the neighborhood. And it's even harder to find an oppositional sound person than it is to find an oppositional wetlands person. It's hard. What we did find were a couple of firms that did peer reviews, and the one that kind of got the highest marks amongst all the sound people that I'm in contact with was Kavanaugh Tosi, T-O-C-C-I, in Sudbury, Massachusetts, for a peer review. They told us, hey, we don't really do oppositional work, but they wondered why in a facility this large that's proposed to go into, right surrounded by 3 residential neighborhoods, why there wasn't a construction noise abatement plan. So that's something for the commission to also consider. I have a letter to read to record from a licensed civil engineer that couldn't be here tonight, but I'll wait to be called back to read that to record.
John, is there a reason you don't want to do it now? Please do.
So John Hafkowitz is a licensed civil engineer. He unfortunately had to be in New York City tonight, but he did write this letter. South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission from John Hafkowitz, civil engineer, Connecticut PE license number 20870, regarding the stormwater analysis for Planning and Zoning application 21-36P. Dear commission members, the stormwater report and analysis for this application is incomplete per the South Windsor zoning regulations, particularly section 6.6.5. This section requires determination and mitigation of the effect of increased volume on downstream watercourses and bodies of water, which has not been provided. There are 10 culverts on the drainage course between the property and the Connecticut River, as well as the retention ponds and other retention ponds and wetlands. The stormwater management report for this project states, the proposed stormwater management system as discussed herein and shown in the reference plans is appropriate for the proposed development on the subject site and should not pose any detrimental impacts to the environment. However, this statement cannot be made without the required assessment and mitigation. And I'll remind you that the this is my own personal comment on Mr. Hafkowitz's letter. The Newbury Brook is what flows down to the Hartford Audubon Society's property, and that's the connection there. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, Mr. Hapowitz is one of the interveners, correct?
Beth, I believe it is. Do you know if he was submitting this as intervener evidence, or? So that's part of Attorney Park's package, apparently.
Okay.
If I might, for the record, my name is James Connor. I'm the attorney for the applicant. My address is 100 Pearl Street in Hartford. We have not yet seen a copy of this submission, and I think that due process requires that before this commission takes something into the record to decide my client's property rights, that we have an opportunity to review it, to rebut it, and if to the extent that it claims to be based on experts, to have a right to cross-examine those experts. And we haven't even seen the document at this point. Can we? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against this application or have questions or concerns? Gentleman in the green.
Hello, Dan Edwards, 131 Hilton, speaking in opposition against, of course, this project. But a question, the town engineer's testimony or statements earlier raised a question, something to the extent about a calming study be commissioned, but I think it just seems a little problematic. I think for the past 2 years now, there's a traffic calming study that's been underway over on Laurel Street, other side of town. So it just seems a little unusual to suggest a traffic calming study right now when there's already massive issues, and then would that be before or after the approval? I mean, time is kind of the essence, so I'm not confident that that's really gonna do anything. As for the Brooks Acoustic Corporation, it wasn't exactly clear who commissioned that study, whether it was the applicant or Commissioner Wagner. Doesn't seem like there is, that they're really truly an independent firm, at least to this town of South Windsor. So, similar to needing a new traffic study, a separate noise ordinance. Again, these are things that require lots of extra time and effort, but I think the town needs to do their job as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Please step forward, and if you could sign in. Thank you. Mr. Edwards, did you sign in?
Good evening. Karen McLean, 26 Edgewood Drive. I spoke to you at the last meeting about the current value of our properties and what we pay in taxes. But I want to talk about something else right now. I'm wondering if this facility is built, what is its lifespan? And what is it going to look like in 56 years or 63 years? Maybe like the Mastec property on steroids? Why do I say 56 and 63? Because I'm a shareholder in Pleasant Valley Estates, LLC, begun in 1958 and completed in 1965. We are still a going concern today. Neighborhoods are a reliable and consistent source of tax revenue, and they don't fall into decay and graffiti and attracting bad elements. They rejuvenate themselves, they revitalize themselves. Somebody moves out, somebody comes in. It's ongoing. You're asking us to be damaged by something that's temporary. It's not going to be here operational in 56 or 63 years. Pleasant Valley Estates still will, if you allow it. So I hope that you will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Please step forward. Mr. Parks?
So I just want to keep the record open. Mr. Butler is 12 minutes away, so
Okay,
before you close. Thank you.
okay. Michelle, as far as the applicant and the information that we've received tonight, which could have a bearing on their approval or lack of approval, what can we do to keep the hearing open so that that can be reviewed by them if they want to dispute any of the information?
I mean, you have until December 7th to take action on this. So you have a meeting November 30th, next week. If you want to have opportunity for comment on it.
Okay. With Mr. Butler being an intervener and being 12 minutes away,
I think Attorney Connors wanted to give some comments. Maybe he wants to.
okay.
If we're kind of holding on the.
Good evening, Commission. My name is John Plant, professional engineer with Langen Engineering and Environmental Services. I prepared the traffic study for the project. I am a professional engineer with that many years of experience in developing traffic studies. And the statement by Mr. Parks about the claims that we had indicated that the traffic study, the things he stated earlier. Just to be clear on that, what I stated and what my person stated is that the Office of State Traffic Administration has approved the methodology in the traffic study as presented to them. Their final issuance of an administrative decision has not happened yet because they can't issue that until this board acts and the LTA provides concurrence to their conditions. So again, we stand by that the traffic report was reviewed by DOT and OSTA. The methodology, the trip gen, the methodology, and the results of the traffic study were approved by them. And they are just awaiting the resolution of this board relevant to issuing their final documentation. So I just wanted to be clear on that there was no confusion on our part on what we were trying to say. And I know I was clear that they approved the methodology in the traffic impact study. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak under public comment?
Hi, I've spoken before, and actually, Janet Giamarino, I'm at 139 Judy Lane. Thank you. My daughters were up here last time speaking about our neighborhood, and I can attest that we do still play in the streets, game on, game off. You'll often hear me screaming out, car, and all the kids scurry to the side of the road. I find it appalling that my daughters brought up their concerns about safety and having so many tractor trailers so close to their neighborhood, and their concern for being able to play outside. And the applicant has come back with, here's a great idea. We will add a sidewalk leading from our tractor trailer distribution facility where highways are so close. We're gonna put in a sidewalk right to your neighborhood, right where you're playing in the streets. It's horrifying as a parent. Horrifying. That's what I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you very much. John, I'll call on you next after she's cleared from the podium. John, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just had one chart that actually speaks to
If you could
some
raise,
actual.
raise up the microphone. a
Sorry.
little, too.
I actually have one chart that speaks to two specific planning and zoning regulations. And I'm pulling that up. If you could. Come on, electrons. This speaks specifically to 4.1.5 and the lack of a perimeter road, and I'm forgetting the actual come on. Oh, it's still open. That's the problem. Hang on a second. Yeah, this speaks to the lack of a perimeter road, and it affects the queuing situation. So Derek's not really here to speak about that, but this is Church of the Living God down at 199 Deming Street, and they have 199 parking spaces, and you can see around the outside of the whole parking area, there's a relatively wide perimeter road, okay? So for example, you know, this perimeter road, you know, is a requirement of 4.155, or I'm sorry, 6.4.4I. Whenever you have, I think it's greater than 200 parking spaces. And the application, it does show a way to get around the edge of the parking lot if you really look carefully, but I question whether tractor trailers could really orbit the area. And that directly speaks to the queuing issue that Derek Butler is more qualified to speak to than I am. So, you know, have a look at the plans carefully. If you feel that there's not a perimeter road here and that the interaction of these two zoning regulations, you know, is worthy of your consideration, then I ask you to do so. Also, it's easy enough to visit 199 Deming Street as part of your tours. Maybe you could just drive around and get a feel for the width of the perimeter road and look at what's proposed here. Okay, thank you for your forbearance.
Thank you very much. Seeing as Mr. Butler isn't here yet, I am going to go to commissioners' questions, and when the intervener gets here, I'll give him the opportunity to speak. So at this time, I'm going to turn to Commissioner Wagner, who is joining us remotely. Steve, you.
Hello.
Good evening, Steve.
I'd like to report that I have been able to hear all of the speakers from my location. So I guess I have a whole bunch of questions and comments. We were going to try to get the DEEP report on animal impact of the project. And the question I had is whether that report incorporated the effect of noise, not just the, you know, the layout of the land and the, you know, the availability of forest and trees and so on. Do we have anything on that yet?
I don't know if the applicant wants to address it. I can't see you, Steve, but I did speak to Robin Bloom from the Department of Environmental Protection, and she indicated that that is not part of the consideration when they look at the DBB database. They're looking at it based on the Endangered Species Act. Things like pollution and things like that are other air quality or different areas of the DEP that would review those things. So the answer is no, those aren't considerations.
Okay. I don't know whether that's a consideration for us. Who has that responsibility?
Who are you directing that to, Steve?
I guess to Michelle, because she.
Again, I
Ms.
guess, could you explain to me exactly what responsibility you're referring to?
Well, you said that there were other parts of DEEP that deal with noise and pollution.
You know, so I thought your question to me was, is noise and pollution considered when they look at the DBB, whether or not there's endangered species on the site? And that was a question I asked, is whether or not noise is looked at the effect or pollution when you're considering that. And the answer I received was no, they look at whether or not there's a presence of endangered species on the site, and that is the extent of their review, and then it gets, other areas of the state would look at other factors. Air quality was referenced as an area that would look at things. I honestly don't know whether through the stormwater management report anything else gets looked at. I don't know if the applicant has anything they can add to that or not.
All right. Well, thank you for making that phone call for us. Okay. I've listened to some complaints about the traffic study. I guess I don't have an issue with the accuracy of that report. It strikes me as a typical report, and they based it on assumptions about this type of facility. So I personally won't ask about that. I do want to go back to the question of this not being a truck terminal, that the applicant is claiming it's not going to be a truck terminal. And I guess, to me, that impacts the noise that the site would make. I would imagine that all 200 plus trucks that we're estimating will be coming and going, or 200 trips by trucks every day would be not all tractor trailers. Some would be maybe medium duty trucks. So tractor trailers would come into the site, be broken down, whatever's on their containers or their trailers, and then the distribution part would probably go out to a smaller truck. Is that a fair assumption? And I guess Mr. Damali or Ben could answer that question for me.
They're talking, Steve, so.
I didn't sign in last time.
I guess just to clarify, I'm thinking that, we may have trucks coming in from an interstate source, but then if we're really truly distributing more locally, we would need smaller trucks to do that distribution.
John Flanagan. Again, the ITE land use used for the traffic study based on what the potential tenant market is and the site plan is designed to is a high cubed parcel warehouse. It's not intended to be, I think what you're alluding to, Mr. Wagner, is like a last mile distribution center with vans coming in and out. That's not what this is intended to be. It's a parcel hub that comes in, gets stored, and then will leave from there. It's very dependent on the tenant, on what type of vehicles, if they're all tractor trailer trucks or they're a mix. The ITE land use code has in those studies various locations. One of those studies is from here in Connecticut, and it doesn't break down how many trucks are tractor trailers or box trucks. It just includes as one category of trucks. So it could be, as you point out, it could be various size trucks depending on the tenant's operations.
So from a noise, don't go away, I'll ask you some more questions. From a noise perspective, I guess if I saw tractor trailers coming in and tractor trailers carrying out what was delivered by the tractor trailers bringing product in, I would begin to think that that's more like a truck terminal. If I see a smaller number of tractor trailers and a larger number of smaller vehicles distributing, and again, I'm looking at the biggest thing that could be happening here. Obviously, some tenants may not be doing what we're talking about, but this is, the biggest thing that could be happening here. And the reason I'm maybe talking about this is it might be possible to reduce the noise of the site further by limiting the type of trucks that are allowed to service the bays that are closest to the ends of the building. We could set a distance. The building is 800 feet long. You could set a distance of, say, 200 feet at each end that are not allowed to be serviced by tractor trailers. And since this is truly a distribution center and not a truck terminal, they should be able to operate in such a way that smaller vehicles are servicing the ends of the building.
Just for one point of clarity, I have a wide variety of experience, civil engineer, traffic engineer. I've worked on a number of these projects, and I'm not claiming to be an acoustic engineer providing testimony. But one thing I do know is sound is an additive. So multiple trucks the sound from multiple trucks do not add to more sound. It's not additive. So it's a sound level, right? There's a sound level, right? And if there's more trucks operating at that sound level, that doesn't add on top of the sound. So it doesn't exponentially increase the sound. Sound is at a level, no matter how many sources are creating it. It doesn't add on top of it. So one truck at 50 decibels and then there's another truck at 50 decibels doesn't become 100 decibels. That's one thing I have learned through this process. So to indicate, I'll defer to others on changing the makeup of the building.
Well, let me just comment on that. It's true that you don't add the decibels, but the energy put out by two trucks is twice the energy put out by one truck. That would lead to a 10 decibel increase, I believe. But I see Mr. Damali has a comment.
Yes, Commissioner Wagner, 2 weeks ago at the last hearing on November 9th, you asked us to take a look at, and given everybody recognized that we had a very tight time frame, 2 weeks, try to get an acoustical engineer to take a look at what we're doing, proposing in terms of from the loading docks to the closest point of a residential property line. What was the effect in terms of decibels at that corner of that property? We asked him to do that. Bennett Brooks did. He's a licensed professional engineer. He's an acoustical expert, and he looked at that particular item in the last 2 weeks. We're lucky that he could do that. And he concluded that we would meet the state standard on the state statutes for noise and also for the town ordinance. Would be below the thresholds for both nighttime operations and for daytime operations. He concluded that. That's what we asked him to do. We didn't ask him to go way beyond that because there wasn't insufficient time to do it. And as you know, all these people are backed up like crazy in terms of their workload. But he was able to put it in, get it in there, and he signed his report, stamped his report. It's been submitted that indicates that we will conform to noise levels, standards, both state statute and the local, and be well below those thresholds. So that was his professional opinion. If we start looking at different size trucks and all that, he was looking at trucks from that particular site to our site. And he stated that we're not going to exceed the standard. So what would the point be of restricting the types of vehicles at the loading docks in terms of noise if we're already going to meet, professional engineers indicate, acoustical engineers indicate we're not going to exceed the standard. And that was, by the way, that was with the assumption that the commission agreed to the 12-foot by 60-foot wooden noise barrier that we had proposed at the last hearing. So that's what we were asked to do, and we actually found an engineer. His office is in Vernon.
I certainly appreciate that, and I did study the report in detail. I guess I mean, the idea of putting that barrier in kind of came along late. Chairman Pasacona suggested that. I think it leaves, in terms of what the residents are going to experience, it still leaves some issues. The assumption was we had the 80 decibels that were assumed, from the truck as the source is a number I would agree with for a compliant truck. We do have an issue with straight stack, so that I guess is a police enforcement issue. If people are driving around with these trucks that and showing up at this site with trucks that don't comply with federal regulations. But I do think that, we're going to be having more than one truck, and some of the trucks will be operating away from that barrier. Now, that barrier, I think, gave you roughly 10 decibels of noise reduction, although it depended on the frequency. I guess I'm concerned that, and I recognize that this was done at the last minute and in a very short time frame. But once a truck moves away from that barrier, we don't get the benefit of the barrier. So trucks moving around in the parking lot, or multiple trucks, or trucks idling, will add to the noise. So it's clear that one truck sitting behind that barrier, I agree, would not produce a noise level that exceeded the numbers in the regulation. And I guess everyone should remember that the regulation actually has an exemption for moving vehicles, or vehicles with their engines running. We're doing, we're looking at this, not in terms of trying to enforce the noise ordinance, but just trying to make sure the site is designed in such a way as to minimize the health impact. The issue still remains, there are going to be trucks moving about. There are going to be multiple trucks producing the kind of noise that this study did for one truck, which is fine. There are going to be, other kinds of sources and reflections off the truck itself that make it complicated. That's my concern. It's, that one truck, you got me the number I was looking for. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I just, actually, when I did my very crude and admittedly unprofessional analysis, it was not with that short barrier in mind that only covers one truck. So I'm still concerned that we have multiple trucks moving about, multiple trucks idling. And by the way, idling, we may have a 3-minute idling rule, but what we heard from one of the interveners is that trucks really don't operate that way. In the winter, that 3-minute rule doesn't apply. There are needs for 20 minutes of idling when a truck is being prepared to go on the road. And I haven't heard anything to dispute that. So I'm not convinced that we can count on a 3-minute idling time. So those are my concerns about the acoustic report. The report itself, did exactly what we asked for, but then how do we interpret that in terms of the issues for the public, people living nearby? And I do think we have to consider two factors. One is there probably will be more than one truck at any given time, and also not every truck is going to be hiding behind that barrier. Personally, I would have preferred to see a barrier on the south edge of the parking lot that was longer than one truck in length, but that's me. I did listen to what was said about the queuing. I mean, it sounds like the queuing is okay. I didn't get to see the diagram where I am. I would appreciate seeing the trail. A number of the commenters commented on noise on Main Street, and let me just say that that's not directly relevant to this, but I was on Main Street actually when I was campaigning for the seat I'm sitting in. We'll be sitting in when I get back home. And the noise there is actually intolerable. And I think, maybe the town and the residents there need to talk about some sort of an abatement procedure there, which would probably involve some sort of a barrier along the highway. I know it's a historic area, and I know there's actually at least one house that's actually on Route 5, but maybe there's something we can do to help those folks, from a town council perspective. Let me just go on.
May I comment with respect to the trail?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just said I like the idea of having a trail connection.
Yeah, the trail was designed as part of the industrial park. And there are contributions from entities within the industrial park toward the trail, maintenance of the trail. The trail is westerly of Edgewood Drive primarily, and we were proposing to connect to that trail from our site, industrial site, to the trail system which is in the industrial zone through the open space off our southwest corner. We're proposing to do that. That's at the discretion of the commission whether or not we do that. We don't have to do that. But I believe our clients are going to be contributing toward the ongoing maintenance of that trail system as the other parcel owners within the Constitution Landing Industrial Park have. And there's an existing trail, I guess you call it easement, that is westerly of the lots on Edgewood Drive, abutting, for example, where between Carlos Pasta, for example, and Edgewood Drive residences, there is an existing trail system there, and all those properties have to contribute toward the maintenance of it. And this would be to connect to that for the benefit of the employees of our operation, just like the other employees of other facilities within the industrial zone can benefit from it as well. That was established years ago. It's an existing encumbrance on those properties, and I understand that our clients are part of that, and by acquiring this property have agreed that they will also contribute toward the ongoing maintenance of it. So we're proposing to connect our site to that. We're not proposing to connect our site down to Edgewood Drive. We're only trying to connect to the trail system. We don't have to do that, and we won't do it unless the commission wants us to do it.
Well, I, for one, would ask you to do it, but that's up to the whole commission, obviously.
Yep.
I had a question about, and maybe this is for our town planner, Michelle Leip. We see property lines, the existing property lines are based on a subdivision plan that we must have approved in the 1990s, our predecessors. Are we required to allow an applicant to merge property lines, or can we review the change in the subdivision in our role as a planning commission?
No, the applicant can combine property lines as part of an application process. It's done.
I mean, I know that happens all the time, but
Yeah.
and we normally actually
quite
ask
frankly,
for
the
that.
subdivision would have expired from a 5-year perspective on the land records as far as any improvements associated with it, because it was done in 1994, I think. But there is no issue with them having multiple properties coming together. One of the things that I had recommended and would recommend approval condition if it were approved is that they be combined by deed into the land records so that the assessor carries them as one property, as the zoning applies to it as one property.
And then, and thank you for that. I guess a question about the stormwater report. The way I read, are you actually, and this is for Ben, or I guess, are you actually asserting that there'll be less stormwater, peak stormwater runoff from this site than there is currently in the worst case storms?
I think that would be Daniel Jameson from Design Professionals. So he's stepping forward now, Steve.
Hello, Mr. Wagner. For the record, my name is Daniel Jameson, professional engineer in the state of Connecticut and project manager at Design Professionals. And to answer your question, Mr. Wagner, yes, we did reduce peak flows to the existing stilling basin that would flow through Carlos Pasta's property. And we did receive net reductions of peak flows for all the flows leaving the site. So answer your question is yes.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, Mr. Chair, that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Did the intervener arrive yet? I can't see with this podium blockage.
Yes, he did.
So, good evening.
Good evening. My apologies, I was dealing with a situation out of town.
Yep, and if you could, please speak into the microphone.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Did you have additional testimony that you want to provide us?
Yes, I do, actually. In the essence of keeping things brief, I reviewed the queuing plan presented yesterday, and it doesn't make sense to me. It's a little tight.
Has a copy of this been provided to the applicant?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of things with it. When I took a look, it doesn't look like it's drawn to scale on this queuing sketch. When I took a look at the distances needed for a tractor trailer, about 80 feet per unit. It appears to me that they've got room for 3 units deep from the fence line to the street, not 4 as it's shown. And when you take a look at the width, I know they're stacking them up too deep, too wide in the sketch. When you take a look at looks like 3 lanes, 3 12-foot lanes, 2 inbound and 1 outbound. The measurements just don't make sense. So, yes, a trailer's 8.5 feet wide. You look at a tractor, you've got mirrors a foot on either side. It's just too tight. It's too tight. There's no way of stacking up perfectly, 2 units next to each other. These are large pieces of equipment, 75 foot long. You've got to take into consideration the sways and angles and so forth. There's just no way of guaranteeing that you could have 3 or, as it's drawn, 4 tractor trailers perfectly lined up with only, 9 inches on either side of sway room. It's just too tight there. Okay? So in previous testimony, I outlined some addresses, a couple of Amazon facilities in Windsor, the Coca-Cola facility on Route 30, where there's tremendous driveways, runways to get into the site, right? So once a trailer or trailers pull off of the main road, they can pull in and stack up and be staged, right? In some of those facilities, you can get 10 or 15 staged, waiting to get in. With this site, you just don't have that room. You don't have the room. And the outcome is you will have equipment in the street, in town roads. So that was what I wanted to explain. That was the reason for the testimony. For the queuing and staging. There just isn't enough queuing room. So also when you take a look at the site, it looks like half of the loading docks when you pull in from that main gate as it's drawn, half of the loading docks or half of the traffic is on the right-hand side. So when a truck pulls in, you can pull in on the right and back in easily on the left. Half of the doors and docks, the trucks would have to pull in from the gate on the left side. So that's called, in my industry, it's called a blind side back in. And we try to avoid this at all costs, right? It takes twice as long. Drivers can't see where the tail ends of the trailers are going. And the plan does not make sense to me. That sort of scenario we try to avoid, right? Blind side back in. So the whole premise of the plan is based on something as an industry we try not to do. And so it takes twice as long to back in, takes twice as much space. It's a hazard. It's dangerous because drivers backing in can't see what they're backing into. It's just too tight. So based on the lack of queuing space, based on the plan of having half of the back ends at the facility be blindside, there's not enough turnaround space when you take a look at the north end corner of the building, the southeastern side. There's just no room to turn and maneuver, right? So it would create, in my opinion, a backlog. And when you have a backlog, trucks waiting to get in, trucks taking too long to back in, everything swells out into the street, right? It would swell right out to Governor's Highway, up and down the street. The only staging area would be like the corners of Nutmeg Road, Talbot Lane and Governor's. It creates a mess. I've seen it. I know in my facility, I feel bad for the neighborhood because when we get busy, we'll create a backup, mile and a half long sometimes, where we're pushing to try and get equipment in and get them in and offloaded and on their way. And it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle, especially once we get a unit in and it's offloaded. Well, these guys just don't leave, right? They wait for their next assignments, so it's always a push for us to try and get them offloaded and out of the area, So that's what I had for you tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. I will turn back to commissioners. We'll start with Commissioner Bernstein.
No additional questions or comments, thanks.
Could I perhaps, my apologies, can I add just just a sidebar, some additional information on freight terminal versus distribution center?
Sure.
Okay, so I went through, it's probably a page and a half of information. So the trucking industry has changed, okay? It's not the same as it was 10, 15 years ago. A lot of the companies and players that were involved.
Please speak into the microphone.
A lot of the players and companies that were involved are closed and out of business. In the last meeting, I remember there was references made to a couple of terminals that are still operating from like the 1970s. They were operated from companies from like Preston and Red Star and those guys that struggled with profit margins of 4 cents on a dollar. You really can't, it's unfair to compare those types of facilities that were made for them at the time, just to transfer freight, because they're basically just cement slabs with docks. That's the only business that those companies were in, and they didn't make it, and they're gone. Just right in this area, you've got Red Star, DeCarli's, Casarinos, all those guys are gone. Hartford Dispatch, Maskins, Park Trucking, they're all gone. Today, it's a different scenario. So you've got big retailers, companies involved in e-commerce that are putting up these mega sites, and they don't rely on the old LTL carriers. They do more of that on their own, right? So when you take a look at, let's just say an Amazon, for instance, and a lot of the other retailers and merchandisers are trying to copy that model for low distribution cost, right? So there's a scenario where they operate their own private fleets in their own private facilities, and they've got big dollars to finance many different types of functions in this facility. So they're not set up per se as a trucking terminal, but a big part of their business is dock-to-dock transfers, crossing freight from factory to seller direct. They do printing services. They may do some distribution. They may do some, home delivery. Many different functions in these large multifunction buildings, but they're really built to be able to handle cross-dock and cross-transit type of work, pulling freight from their own trucks onto their own trucks, different modes of transportation, intermodal, van rail. So when you take a look at these sites, you can call it whatever you want, but at least 50% of what they do is freight terminal work. So I just want to make sure that, everybody understood that. It's not like, things aren't like it was 15, 20 years ago, right, where the freight terminal work was only operated by just freight companies. Now you've got the major retailers that are doing a lot of that work in their own facilities. So I've got a lot of information in it. Spent a lot of time with it. So please, when you get a chance, if you can take a look at what I've written for you, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Viteri.
Thank you. A lot of the new information, I've had a chance to look at a little bit. There was one question, though, that I know that Attorney Parks raised an issue that Mr. Butler had come up with that was in the video talking about the height of the exhaust for sound. And this, from the Brooks Acoustic report, in my years as an engineer, I know that if I'm laying on the ground, I'm going to hear one level of sound. If I'm at the top, I'm going to hear a different level of sound. Neither of those is the peak sound that occurs. What I think the Brooks study took was the peak level of sound. I don't know if anybody could tell what height that sound is. I know it's not the 13-foot level. I know it's not ground level, but it's something more like 5, 6, 7 feet or something like that. So I don't know if Brooks addressed it or if you addressed it, but that would be the only thing because of the amount of questions that was raised as to whether or not the study was accurate with the berms and everything. So that was.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
And there's two sides of that. In that video, I was trying to be as conservative as possible, okay? So I've got in the morning, I've got 10 or 15 guys that'll start a tractor, and they'll be patient, and they'll let air build up, and it may take 10, 12 minutes to get to the pressure that they need. I've got other guys that aren't as patient, and to rev that engine higher, they just step on it, right? And it's louder, the engine's revving higher, and it's twice as loud. So what I tried to portray in that little snippet of a video that I provided was just average noise of someone just letting it idle. But that doesn't happen all the time, doesn't happen often.
Notwithstanding, that wasn't exactly, I understand that, and I know that part of that was being addressed in the Brooks study too. Just since we're worried about the maximum decibel level, just where does that occur, at what height? Because there was an issue raised by Attorney Parks that because he believed it was higher, then the Brooks study wasn't as accurate. And so that's the only reason why. I appreciate what you just said, but that wasn't exactly what I was asking. So I don't know if Brooks took it into consideration or whatever, but at some point that would be interesting to know. That was it.
Okay.
Would you like an answer to that, by the way, in his report?
Pardon me?
In the report, he indicated that trucks were at 8-foot height and that the receiver end at the residential property is 5 feet.
Okay, and that's what I thought, but, so he was basing that on the fact that that is where the maximum decibel level occurs. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner LeBlanc.
Thank you. I have nothing more to add tonight.
Okay, Commissioner Foley, and I just want to confirm for the record that you've had a chance to review
Absolutely.
the past testimony and
Yep.
feel confident you're, okay.
Yep. I missed the one long one. I was here for the previous one, but I did go through all the meetings, all the
Okay,
minutes.
thank you.
First of all, I guess for Mr. Flanagan, you had commented, and you're not the sound expert, but you did say that multiple trucks will not increase the decibel levels?
Just live right. John Plant.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, sorry.
Clarity.
John Plant, okay, sorry.
That's why I didn't react right away. Yes, as I said, I'm not an acoustic expert. I've done millions of square feet in this sector. I've done probably all the Stop and Shops in Connecticut over my career. And as you can imagine, this topic comes up during those discussions. And as a generalization, sound is not additive. So 50 decibel sound and another 50 decibel sound doesn't add to 100 decibel sound.
I
That's all
understand
I'm
that, but
trying to
there's
say.
got to be some increase when you have energy. So when you have
That's-
30 trucks idling, one guy's trying to build pressure and he's accelerating, you're telling me that it's going to stay at 45 decibels? That's a yes or no?
Not my expertise.
Okay.
I don't want to go there. It's not my expertise. I
Then
wouldn't
that's-
want to provide testimony outside my expertise.
Fair enough.
Thank
But
you.
While I do got you at your expertise.
Sure.
Was your traffic study done on a Sunday?
No, it wasn't done on Sunday.
So June 6th was not a Sunday then?
It was it was multiple days. Our traffic counts were multiple days.
No, I just saw, one of the people had said that it was done on a Sunday.
Correct.
I guess, Peter, what are the number of trucks at peak and non-peak? Or again, you, stay up there.
Sorry, I didn't hear that whole question.
The number of trucks at peak and non-peak, and define peak and non-peak.
Sure. Based on this land use, the ITE studies of similar facilities, and not 30 years ago studies, these are fairly recent studies, indicates that there's about 105 trucks that come into the site and about 105 trucks that leave the site. And for peak hour, that would equate to approximately 16 trucks in the morning coming in, 16 leaving, and in the afternoon peak hour, 11 trucks coming in and 11 trucks leaving. That's based on the ITE percent distribution of traffic over the day. Again, that's a an average for these this type of land use.
And who did the design for the queuing? Alright. So, Ben, going off of what Mr. Butler said, this is an absolute, these guys must have all just graduated from NETS because they are parked perfectly. There's not a guy out of line, everything, this is amazing. And I don't believe that this is what is gonna happen. This is a pretty tight area. And being able to drive a truck, I have a Class A myself, blindside back end is, you don't wanna do it. It's, this area here, is this the maximum real estate you have for queuing trucks off of Talbot Lane?
For the record, Ben Wheeler, Director of Operations from Design Professionals. As we've stated, both at previous hearings and tonight, a lot depends on the operations of the facility, and without a tenant named for this, it's difficult to understand the exact queuing. The worst case scenario is if it is a gated operation, and that gate happens to be closed and not allowing trucks to enter. Obviously, a lot of the facilities that have been built recently, some have gates, some do not. So just further proving that it depends on operations of the individual tenants. So if the gate is closed, there is room for 8 WB67 trucks between the gate and Talbot Lane. Understand that that diagram that is shown is obviously they're all parked straight and in a perfect row. But as far as it being tight, as we've mentioned, the 2 ingress lanes are 12 feet wide, which is the same width as a highway lane. So we think that certainly that provides adequate width for 2 trucks to stack side by side within the 24 feet allocated to the ingress lanes. As far as the blind side back in, I am not a CDL driver, but I certainly know that that is not ideal. The experts in the industry that we've talked to for marketing this property have said the same thing, that in this property, as Mr. Butler indicated, if you come in and you make a left, you would be having a blindside back in if you just went immediately to the dock. But obviously, if you come in on this property and turn to the left, there is circulation that allows the tractor trailers to circulate around, head back to the south, so that they would not be making a blindside back in, so the docks would be on the driver's side of the vehicle.
In a perfect world.
It's in actuality with the way the site plan is laid out. So if the drivers are averse to the blindside back in, there is a provision to allow them to circulate around and avoid the blindside back in.
Okay, I have nothing else.
Okay, Commissioner Dexter.
I really
Excuse
don't
me,
have.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm an engineer with experience in acoustics and decibel calculation, so if you'd like an answer to the truck noise question, I'd be happy to offer that, or I'll sit back down.
It's Commissioner Foley,
If I could? Thank
Have
you.
your-
For the
can I
record,
have-
Brian Wiley, engineer, aerospace engineer, and experience in acoustics by trade. To answer your question, decibel math works on the power of 10. So 250 decibel trucks, it's double the sound power, but when you do the square root of that, it comes out to 53 decibels. If you have 10 50 decibel trucks, you end up with 60 decibels of noise. If you have 150 decibel trucks, you end up with 70 decibels of noise. So it goes exponentially by powers of 10. So that's how it works. But that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Are you all set?
I'm good now.
Okay, Commissioner Dexter?
I don't really have any new questions to ask, but I did want to make a comment about Mr. Butler and the fact that he's a very credible speaker, and I appreciate his real-life experience here because we don't operate in that world. So we've learned a lot tonight from you, especially how the site's been laid out and the queuing issues. And I think that you're right. In this day and age where there's no longer the pure freight terminal or warehouse, there is more like a hybrid that's happening with the big online and retailers. And there are cross-docking, and there's stuff put to stock, and it's a combination, whether it's their trucks or a bunch of other carriers. So I'm just really not sure what we even have here without a tenant that's been announced. So I'm just going to say that and.
Commissioner Cavagnaro.
I'll have to say roughly the same thing. I didn't really have any new comments to make tonight. I still had some concerns regarding the November 9th comments that I made. I haven't seen that they were addressed, but besides that, like I said, there's some insight that we did gain tonight from the speakers that we did have that did provide some of those, some of the information that we weren't necessarily clear on, so I'll thank them for that. And yeah, like I said, I don't really have anything new to say, and I'll keep it brief and short like that, so thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Bernstein, did you have something?
Mr. Butler, quick question. A bus driver, before going out, will do a pre-trip inspection, and that will add noise in the form of testing the air brakes, testing the horn, et cetera. Do trucks do anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. So
Would that add to the noise that we're talking about here?
you've got to test every system: suspension, steering, braking, lights, horn, everything.
So bus drivers do it like at the beginning of the day,
Correct.
and they'll do a post-trip inspection at the end of the day. So I'm just trying to ascertain,
It's the exact same regulation for bus drivers and any CDL commercial vehicle. So that check, pre-trip check is done before that unit leaves in the morning, and post-trip is done to see if there are any defects that need to be repaired before the next day. Right?
Okay.
So the morning is the longer one because the units are cold, and it takes time to build up air and so forth and get the motor warm, right? So that's why I say it very easily. I was trying to be conservative at 20 minutes to half an hour, but a lot of times it's longer than that.
well, having been a bus driver for DATCO, I can tell you it was about 45 minutes to do it right.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
the reason I bring it up is because we're talking about the noise from the engine, but when you think about it, there's lots of other noises that are being generated from all this that we haven't really taken into account here, and I just wanted to get that out there on the record, so thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Okay. Commissioner Foley?
Yeah, I mean, my main concern is the site plan as far as the queuing, and then again, not knowing who the end user would be. If it is gated, I have a concern of, and I'm glad that there's an 8-spot queuing section, but beyond that, there's guys that need to get off the road. They've got a logbook. They need to get they need to get parked. They're going to get as close to the terminal as possible. If they can't get into the terminal because it is gated, they're going to be trying to find other vacant lots throughout town. My concern is not just, it is this site. I'm concerned with the site itself and how it works. But what we've done in the past, when we approved Home Depot, we talked to the train experts from Wyoming, Genovese, whoever it was, and they told us that they would never interrupt our track, our intersection for more than 3 minutes at a time, 6 moves per 45 minutes. They have failed us, and we have failed the community on that decision. We had another site plan approval with another place that is in violation, and it just seems like we grant approvals, and then we can't do anything about it when it's done. And right now, we don't know who the end user is. If it is gated off, we're gonna have trucks on Governor's Highway. I don't think there's enough turnaround, I don't think there's enough room on the site plan for this, and that's just my opinion right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ben, and you might end up deferring, but if you could come to the mic. Our minutes of October 26th, 2021, and it's talking about the stormwater, and I realized Daniel wasn't there at the time, but I'm thinking you might want to correct this statement. It says, Mr. Wheeler commented that the stormwater designs were complete per the 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual. Mr. Wheeler added that the designs exceeded what is recommended in that manual, adding that all calculations were based on a 2-year storm, which is 3 times the recommendation per the manual. Is that a correct statement? I thought some of the calculations were based on 25 years, 50 years, 100 years, and I'm looking to correct the record of the minutes.
Since, again, for the record, Ben Wheeler, since I was on the record, I'd be happy to respond to that, and if Mr. Jameson wants to add to it, he can. That is a correct statement. When you're looking at water quality treatment, that is what that particular statement is referring to. It's not the overall size of the stormwater attenuation or the underground structures. So the treatment portion of the stormwater was sized for a 2-year storm, which is more than what is required in the regulations. The overall size of the underground units, the surface detention basin are sized, taking into account all the way up to and including a 100-year storm. So if that makes sense. So from a treatment standpoint, they were sized for a 2-year storm. There's certain calculations and guidelines that are in the water quality manual that speak to that, and again, sized in excess of what the manual requires. And I'll let Mr. Jameson just add to that if he would like.
Okay, before he does that, you can sit down, Ben, thank you. Daniel, as far as the stormwater, now, I'm a simple kind of guy. I'd like to know, for you to explain how this works, over what period of time. Are we gonna get stormwater into Newberry Brook? I know that's down the line. I want to know roughly when it hits Newberry Brook. We had 2 storms back-to-back during this year, and how a delay like that would influence Newberry Brook for flooding. Just, you know, in my mind, if we've had those flooding issues with just the storms that we've had this year, isn't the drainage from the stormwater for this project gonna just make it worse? So,
Yes,
have at
Mr.
it.
Pasquonis, I can answer that question. For the record again, Daniel Jameson, project manager and professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. And what we did, we matched all peak flows leaving the site. Now, we are approximately, I measured to Main Street, we're 750 feet from Main Street. Just a rough sketch off of CT Echoes, their imagery. But we have maintained what is the requirements of state and town improvement regulations, or basically to control the peak flows for the 2, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storms. What would happen after, so with that, the water that we're gonna send leaving our site, it won't have any more energy than the water that would leave our site in the existing conditions. So what that means is I wouldn't expect any changes to the hydraulic activity of the downstream watersheds based off of what our peak flows are saying, or the expected peak flows leaving our site. And we also do have 2 other detention basins that the water would flow through before it reaches, crosses underneath Route 5 and then dumps to the Newberry Brook. So with that, there are additional measures of attenuation that we're not taking account for. And then even in our system, in addition to what Mr. Wheeler was explaining, as we designed the water quality to consider the 2-year storm, we also have an additional foot of freeboard. We have 2 feet of freeboard in our detention basin for just to provide extra storage for the event of a storm over the 100-year storm event. And also we have 2 feet of, well, 1 foot of freeboard inside of the underground chamber system, but 2 feet to the lowest catch basin in that truck parking area. So there is additional storage on site. So if there was a storm event larger than the 100-year storm event, it allows further attenuation on site before the water would get sent on to Newberry Brook.
Is that prior to any of the water getting sent on, or is there a certain amount of water that starts flowing after, say, like a 25-year storm event, you know?
Yeah, well, we have flows in all storm events. So in the 2-year storm, we will have some outflow from our site, but no more than the existing condition. And we met those. We met that rate with our storm design. And yeah, so to answer your question, yes, there will be flows from every storm event. There will be a 2-year storm event. There would be water leaving the site, but not at a rate that exceeds the existing.
Okay. All right, thank you, Daniel.
Oh, and I apologize. It's not 750. It's 7,500 feet was my measurement. So it's more than a mile. I apologize. I left a zero off for that.
I do that all the time. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Along with Commissioner Foley's concerns, as far as queuing, I have the same concerns. Trailer trucks never pull tight, and they don't like being inside of lines. As far as, I drove by an existing site in South Windsor that has a much longer entranceway, which I believe when that application came around, it had like 13 trucks shown. Plenty of parking in the driveway, never come out to that street. And yet I drove by there and they had their driveway full and multiple trailer trucks out on the road, blocking any traffic that might come by. I understand these are projections, but it's almost like the stars got to line up to make that work the way that it's drawn. They're pulling in from a 90-degree angle. It just doesn't seem feasible. I understand what you're saying with the gate, and you know, if there's a guard shack or something, it might be different. But how do we move forward? With this information and get an application that's accurate. I understand what Commissioner Foley's saying about us approving things and then them not being exactly how they were displayed to us. And I'm not going to cite any examples at this time, but I do have concerns about that. Brian Wiley, are you still in the audience? Yes. If you could step forward to the microphone. I read a report that you did regarding the stormwater, and if you could elaborate on it a little for this application.
Yeah.
You had some
Yes.
major concerns, it sounded like.
Yes, Brian Wiley, 954 Main Street. Mr. Chair, are you referring to the letter I submitted 2 weeks ago or the affidavit that was in the package that was just submitted here?
I just read it yesterday, so.
So it must be the letter I submitted 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I believe
then.
it was
Okay.
the letter.
Yes.
Oh, actually, could I have read it from an email?
No.
No, you probably read it from 2 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the letter that the letter I submitted when I came up and gave my public statement 2 weeks ago, I was expressing my concern relative to the stormwater runoff that comes down Newberry Brook. The stormwater, basically the entire Newberry Brook watershed, of which this project would flow into that, all collects and goes down the Newberry and goes under the culvert under Main Street. And from there it goes out into the marshes out there where the Hartford Audubon Society property is. So all of that land basically collects and ends up going past my property and then under Main Street. And so what I had pointed out in the letter that I submitted 2 weeks ago was that when we had that storm back in August of this year, we had about 5 inches of rain in the space of a few hours. And it backed up at the culvert passing under Main Street. We had over 4 feet of water in my yard, and it came within about a foot of the steps to my porch. If it had gotten to my porch, it would have ended up in my basement. So that was the concern that I had raised in the letter from 2 weeks ago.
Okay, and
I'll simply add on to that that while the engineer from Design Professionals, his answer was completely accurate in terms of his report about rate not changing. However, the report submitted by Design Professionals states very clearly that total runoff volume will increase for every storm event. For the 2-year storm event, it increases by 3.6 acre feet, which is a 650% increase in the flow off of this property into the Newberry watershed. And for a 100-year storm event, it increases by, I think the number is 9 acre feet of water into the Newberry watershed. And all of that has to pass through all of the culverts that get down to the Newberry and then go under Main Street out into the marshes on the other side of Main Street.
okay, thank you. Mr. Jameson, would you like to come up, please?
Yes, Mr.
Do you have any comment regarding the testimony we just heard?
Yes, Mr. Wiley is absolutely correct. We do have an increase in volume, and just consistent with like all the projects that we've done before that I've always worked on. We've always matched peak flows, which is the state and normal town requirement. The thought behind it is if the peak flow is matched, then there's less chance of scour because of the velocity that would be associated with that peak flow, and also just the hydraulic grade line, the velocity also impacts the water surface elevation and what happens downstream. So what we do is we look at our site and all the stuff running from off-site running through our site, and just from the location of our site, we are at the top of the Newberry watershed. It's about 1,140 square miles of area, and we are 30 acres, 1,140 acres of area, and we are 30 acres out of that, so about we're 2.5% of that whole watershed area, so at the top of it. So although, yes, the volume will be increasing, the rate that we are releasing that water to the Newberry Brook is at a consistent rate so that we won't be compounding peaks of other of the downstream effects that happen at the Newberry Brook. So by the time the downstream watershed areas get to the flow and get to that area, that should occur before our site gets there and has a compounded effect. So with that, we've talked with Town Engineer Jeff Doolittle about this, and he agreed with our approach. He didn't ask us to look further into anything of potential impacts downstream. It is a known problem of the Newberry Brook that there is an issue there. There's a constraint pipe issue there that should be solved, and I believe the town has plans to solve that in the future. But it is, in my opinion, it is not our project that will further impact this. It is an existing problem, and we won't be adding to that existing problem.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Jeff, does the town have a plan to remedy the situation in the future?
Not a specific plan. There's two issues, as I mentioned, that were raised. One is Newberry Brook, actually, my understanding is it flooded on Newberry Road worse than it flooded on Main Street. Newberry Road was closed because of the constraint where the brook is right next to the road. So when it overtops, it just floods the road. I don't know how that would be solved. That's something we'd have to look at, and it would take some time to figure out how to solve it. The other point that was raised was the culvert under Main Street. I don't know what the exact condition of that culvert is. We don't have any plans immediately to replace that culvert, but it's something we can certainly look at in the future. As far as we know, it's operating satisfactorily, except for during these extreme rain events.
Right. And from the testimony I saw from Mr. Wiley, he had 4 feet of water in his backyard, which was substantial from the pictures that I viewed. But it was cleared 2 hours later, or substantially cleared by then.
Right.
I just have concerns about what the future holds.
The other thing I want to clarify for the commission, if I may, is if you go due west of Main Street, following Newbury Street, the Audubon property is north of Newbury Street. So it's north of where the brook crosses Main Street.
North or west?
It's west, but it's also north. If you look at the map, the Audubon property is north of where Newbury Street would cross Main Street. It's all marsh, but
Okay.
the Audubon property is north of that.
I've walked through it.
Yep.
I'll agree, northwest. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, I'm wondering, I want to clarify what was said earlier, Michelle. Have there been any discussions with the applicant regarding being supportive of any possible traffic calming measures and the possibility of a roundabout being reviewed and possibly added into future, not necessarily at their cost, but it might cost them some land?
We have presented that to the applicant. I believe they've indicated they're amenable to working with the town on that.
Mr. Damali?
If the town wishes to pursue a roundabout, we've indicated, and given what we were given in terms of the size of the roundabout, we've indicated that we are willing to accommodate that and provide the land to the town so that they can do the roundabout. Oh, yeah, subject to our final, it doesn't impact our final plans. And we need to see the final plans of the roundabout. But we are willing to provide the property for a roundabout, and you were indicating easterly of Talbot, I think. So, yeah, easterly of Talbot, so in the area where we have a berm. We believe, we've taken a look at that, we believe we can accommodate that, and we can give the necessary right-of-way to make that happen if the town wishes to pursue it.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, one of the residents had submitted the South Windsor subdivision regulations. Do those are they pertinent to this application?
No, this is not a subdivision request.
Okay, that's more for a residential development,
No, it would be for when you're creating new building lots, which we're not creating any new building lots with
Okay,
this.
okay, thank you. I appreciate the applicant's suggestion about the trail. I'm not sure whether that's a good idea or not. I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but I also understand the neighbor who gave us testimony that she wasn't exactly looking to have one of her kids.
She was indicating out to Edgewood Drive. We're not indicating that. We're indicating internally, go from our site to the existing trail system that's between Edgewood Drive neighborhood and Carlos Pasta. There's an existing system in there that this commission has approved and required an easement.
Do you have any aerial or anything on that trail system? I saw your little, if you want to call it SK drawing or whatever, but I didn't really see how that fits into the neighborhood per se. Where it goes after that dotted line.
We're going to show you on a map. Just give us a minute.
Are you putting it up here? So is that on now? Okay. It's glowing, okay.
While we're doing that, why don't I answer another question, if I may?
Sure.
With respect to the concern about queuing, we're amenable to removing that gate at the front entrance drive for the trucks. Remove that completely for now, and if a tenant, future tenant, wishes to install one, we'd have to return to you for approval of that gate, which should facilitate the queuing issue. So trucks can move more freely through there, so they don't have to back up from a gate. So we'll remove that from the plans, and so it won't be an issue now, but if a future tenant wants that, desires that, have to return to the Planning and Zoning Commission and install it.
And I don't know if it's just something as simple as installing a gate. I believe it's really the queuing that would be part of that gate. Not looking to back up onto Talbot Lane with any trucks.
We understand that. We think that addresses that situation.
Yeah.
Okay. It allows, yeah, it allows for, as Mr. Wheeler has just indicated, it allows for free flow of traffic into our site.
I understand that, but, you know, the gate part of it being just added or something afterwards, that would, I believe, totally change the queuing. If there's free flowing, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if there's a gate and there's queuing, I'm not comfortable with the plan that.
That's why we're saying that we're not going to have a gate. If they ever want to change that, they have to return to the Planning and Zoning Commission for permission for that. And then they have to address a whole overall queuing situation from that gate.
Okay,
That'd be all completely at your discretion.
okay, thank you.
So this does not show in enough detail on the aerial, the trail. Actually, you might be able to see a portion of it here, but in essence, the existing trail for Constitution Landing runs through this wooded area on the Carlos Pasta property. You can see the addition under construction in this area. So it runs on the Carlos Pasta property through a trail easement in this section, continues through this remaining undeveloped lot at Constitution Landing, and connects to the end of Connecticut Avenue, which is the cul-de-sac shown here. So that's roughly where that trail runs through presently. And as Mr. Damali indicated, if the commission sees fit, our proposed connection would come to the southwest corner of the subject property through the town open space in this corner to connect over to that trail system.
And Ben, wave your little hand where it would go through your site.
It would come along the western edge of the site, between the edge of the berm and the property line, around the end of the water quality basin, and connect into the emergency access drive outside of the gate area.
Then we'd go to the east, and then
And
you just show it going along.
that's the extent of because I'm seeing, okay, the Stone Dust Trail ending after that gate.
Correct.
Okay. But that gate will be there, right?
Yes, we're not proposing to remove those gates, obviously to prevent tractor trailers from traversing the emergency access drives both north and south of the building.
Okay. The issue I had with queuing is if you have the potential for a lot of backup with trucks here. And if a building is built and there's not adequate queuing, what do we do then? Now is really the time to address it. Are you showing something else, or?
This is the Macy's Logistics Warehouse, further west of the subject site on Governor's Highway.
Yep.
They have a truck entrance here on Governor's Highway. Have not measured it, but, you know, just looking at, well, here's a tractor trailer here, kind of taking that scale and applying it to this tractor trailer entrance. There's barely only room for one tractor trailer. This is a much larger building than what is being proposed on the 25 Talbot Lane site. They have many more loading docks than what is proposed on the 25 Talbot Lane site. My understanding is they did come back to this commission subsequent to the original site plan to build a secondary access on Nutmeg Road South. I can tell you that I drive by this driveway almost on a daily occurrence. There is currently a trailer, and has been a trailer as long as I can remember, blocking that entrance. So the only means of ingress and egress right now for the Macy's warehouse is in this location. The only point that I'm bringing this up is here's a situation with much less queuing than other properties in town, as you noted, Mr. Chairman. But because of the operations and because of how it works, somehow this has worked without causing major backups on the Governor's Highway.
Right, and what I'm saying, using your example, if you came in that entrance and there was a building right in front, roughly where your hand was, then there could be a big issue with queuing, which is more what you have in your design.
I believe they have a gate, and they do have a guard shack or a check-in center here at this location. And as Mr. DeMalley just indicated, we are willing, as a part of this application, to remove that gate to allow for the free flow access into the truck court area on our subject site, and allow for the full use of this area for any queuing and stacking before they locate a dock or are assigned a dock to pull into. If, when a tenant is determined for the site, they feel it is absolutely necessary to put in a guard shack and a gate, then we'd accept a condition that that tenant or representatives of the tenant would return to this commission to get approval for any mechanism that would prohibit free flow into the truck court area.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I'll accept the intervener coming up to add some input regarding that.
My apologies, I don't like to butt in, but I do know that
Please
site.
speak into the microphone.
I'm
sir.
sorry, my name is Derek Butler, and I don't mean to butt in, but I just wanted to add some insight on the Macy's property. They have a private carrier that does their outbound for them that has about 6 or 7 tractors, right? So they don't have nearly the outbound traffic that was projected for the applicant's site. But what I can tell you is they do have a gate. It's about 30 feet in from Governor's Highway. They have the ability of checking about 1 truck in and 1 truck out at a time. And if you're ever there during peak traffic time for them in the morning, they have a rush about 11:30 to 12. They've got a rush when there's a bunch of pickups and a little bit of outbound, but the trucks do stack up on Governor's Highway, even if there's 3 or 4. Right, so they've got 1 checking in at the gate and 3 or 4 parked on the side of Governor's Highway waiting to get into the entrance. In terms of terminals and gates, this is like post 9/11. I don't know of very many facilities that do not have a guard check-in process. You don't just drive in willy-nilly without being checked into a site. I just don't know it to happen.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Michelle, and if Jeff has any input, there's been a lot of concerns about pollution and whether or not it's in our purview to not necessarily regulate, but where is the line drawn? Who?
You had asked me that question, and I do have that question with our town attorney specifically, so I don't have a response for you. I don't know if the applicant's attorney wants to address it, because I think he may have comments on that.
Okay. Would the applicant's attorney like to address that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, my name is James Connor, attorney for the applicant. I understand your specific question has to do with whether there is a state program relating to development sites as a potential source of air pollution, and how and if that is regulated by the state?
Yes.
Okay. There, in the past, was a program that originated in the 1970s after the Federal Clean Air Act was enacted in 1970. Under the Clean Air Act, states engaged in creating what were referred to as state implementation plans that had a variety of types of sources that they regulated at the state level. For a while, there was a concept in the regulatory community of an indirect source, and a program called the Indirect Source Permit Program that was aimed at all sorts of developments. In the 1970s, when it was the heyday of shopping mall development, that was a particular type of development that was being included in these plans. However, by 1977, Congress pulled the plug on these programs pretty much nationwide. Connecticut designed its program so that it dealt exclusively with regulating indirect sources that involved the construction of a mile or more of new state highway lanes, so that although sometimes these programs would be created as the result of a of private development, where, let's say, the State Traffic Commission, as it was known then, required off-site improvements involving deceleration.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm having a little trouble hearing him. Maybe he could speak into the mic a little better.
Okay, involving things like deceleration lanes, acceleration lanes, where you'd need to aggregate the distances to see if a large development was actually creating more than a mile worth of these lanes, which was, I think, a rare occurrence. I'm not sure if maybe, the only times this occurred was the actual expansion of limited access highways. The only times that may have occurred where a mile was being created in response to private development projects may have been in connection with the casinos in the southeastern part of the state. But by 2012, the DEP repealed the regulations for indirect sources. Generally, I think it was no longer seen as being an effective program to regulate air pollution. That over the at that point, 40 plus years from the enactment of the Clean Air Act, that there were a number of later generations of requirements on the manufacturers of vehicles to control emissions at the tailpipe, and that it became something that was no longer seen as something that you could try to deal with in the aggregate based on where the cars were going. So that program does not exist. The stationary source program still exists with regard to all sorts of manufacturing equipment, all sorts of fuel burning equipment. Most developers of general purpose commercial buildings try to have them designed to keep them under the thresholds and the regulations, to use the smallest units, the cleanest fuels, natural gas, and so on, in order to satisfy those regulations at the time that you get to construction plans and specify what sort of equipment's in the building, which of course in this case can't really be done until there's a tenant who knows what can tell us what the interior build-out program is that they want to see, and what kind of equipment they might need in the building. But in most cases for a commercial building, it's able to be accomplished with something that's under the DEP point source threshold.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners,
I have one question for Mr. Butler. So, looking at this, this queuing, the SK drawing for the queuing, the 8 trucks
Yes,
lined
sir.
up. When these gentlemen arrive, or women arrive at the terminal, a particular truck is assigned what's gonna be put onto him, correct? For his next destination, or is it first come, first serve?
Some are appointments, some are first come, first served, depending on what the demand is.
So in this case, if, say, the inside truck who's behind, he's third guy in line, and he's up, and they're like, you're taking this load to Oklahoma, and he's sitting in this area, and so now we gotta back trucks up, move trucks up.
So you're absolutely correct. So let's take it a step further for a delivery. I've got an appointment 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm half a day ahead of schedule. I'm going to try and get there first, right? So you could have the first guy in line half a day early, 4 hours early. It throws everything out of sync.
Okay. That's it.
all set? Okay. Commissioners, anything else?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wagner?
thank you. I guess I had a couple more questions. First of all, when I was talking about the possibly limiting the ends of the building to smaller trucks, the reason was a source which comes from the non-noise organization indicates that medium trucks put out about 7 decibels less than the heavy trucks that were cited in the acoustic report. So that was why I was suggesting limiting that. And then I'm looking at the I'm trying to remember the name of the company that did the acoustic report, but I'm looking at their figure that shows that the sound of a truck kind of levels off at around 80 decibels as you get below 10 miles an hour, actually below 20 or 30 miles an hour. So I suspect that's mostly engine noise. I'm wondering now if we do a calculation, I think I heard that we're going to have like 16 trucks leaving at the peak time. And I also think I heard that we're going to be running these trucks, idling them for something like a half hour. And I heard different numbers, but let's say a half hour. So if I have 16 trucks leaving during that hour and they're going to be idling for a half hour, I'm calculating that we're going to have 8 trucks idling at the same time. So, Mr. Riley indicated that 2 trucks would give you a 53 or, about a third of a decibel or 3 decibels increase for 2 trucks. And I forget where, I don't know where we'd end up with 8 trucks idling, but Be curious where we would end up if we actually had 8 trucks idling, doing their tests and whatever. The other question I had is, are there other noises that we have to deal with besides engine and exhaust and all the noise associated with running the engine of the truck? For example, when trucks are connected, when they connect up to the trailer, is there a noise that's emitted at that time? And do we know anything about how loud that is? And then there are backup alarms. And I think we saw some material in one of the documents was given to us that they have a variable amount of noise they put out based on the background. But I guess if we could have some comment about other sources of noise and how many trucks would be idling at any given time and how loud that would make them.
Okay, who are you directing that to, Steve?
I guess I would offer Mr. Butler, and then the applicant can perhaps provide an answer.
So
Or
there's
Mr. Riley, for that matter.
a couple of different sides to that. So if there's only, because for some reason I remember the traffic being in the hundreds per day, but now we're down to 16, but that's fine.
That was 1 hour.
16 was peak during the peak.
16 was peak. Okay, so with that, you've got, aside from the engines running, you've got the hookups, you've got the drops, right? And when you drop an empty trailer, sometimes it's not that bad. Sometimes when you're hooking up to an empty, it's not that bad. But if you're hooking up to a trailer that's got, 50,000 pounds on it, it's going to be loud, right? Likewise, when you're dropping a full trailer that's got 50,000 pounds on it, it's very loud. I don't know the decibels, but it's loud. It shakes the building. I know it shakes my building. Other noises associated with it is the back end. So you've got some guys that touch the dock lightly and some guys that are ramming it at 2 miles an hour. Right, so that's the stuff on the outside. There's other noises that resonate. We haven't even touched on the noise that a forklift makes when it hits that dock plate and going into a trailer. This is stuff that rings all day long. But even with your 16 trucks out, your 16 trucks back, those are probably, usually those are your company guys that are assigned to that building that the site has direct control of. I know for our facility, the roadways and all those guys that are in, 10, 15 an hour, it's constant traffic. It's not just the 16 trucks that leave in the morning and come back at the end of the day. It's the constant ins and outs of a lot of the LTL guys also. So I hope that kind of helps address that a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess my question, if given what we know about the site here, how many trucks will be idling, at a peak period? If there were 16 an hour going through.
So you could have your 16 per hour, but then, during the day, especially during the cold winter months, I know, when Dewey Pile delivers to our building and it's 30 degrees or 28 degrees out, they show up. They're not shutting the unit down. It's running just to keep the air warm, to keep the engine warm, to keep the air flowing through the lines. And they're waiting their 15, 20 minutes to get into the dock. They hit the dock, the trucks are running while they're unloading, and when they get signed out, they're still running. So it's constant activity with buildings like this.
So whatever, we saw in the report for one truck at a very low speed, we could probably add several decibels or I don't know how many decibels to that to really assess the noise that's going to be experienced at, say, 124 Edgewood.
Absolutely.
Right, and I'm sure the applicant has something they want to say too.
Okay, Commissioner Wagner, first of all, in the hypothetical that you're posing about, the number of trucks that will be idling, you expressly stated an assumption that the drivers who would be at this facility are going to break the law. And we cannot just assume that the law will be broken at every facility in town. There are anti-idling laws. There's a state anti-idling law. The town of South Windsor has its own anti-idling ordinance that has different terms than the state law. It allows more time, but it doesn't have any exceptions except for municipal and emergency vehicles. But, that being, as I stated, the state law prohibits idling for more than 3 minutes. So when Mr. Butler gets up here and talks about his experience in the trucking industry and about how everybody he knows, runs their engines for 30 or 40 minutes, they're breaking the law. And I object to the notion this commission is going to approach this application on the assumption that there's going to be, law breaking taking place from the get-go, whoever the tenant is at this building. And, in addition, the discussion about, the noise that's created is based on a discussion of truck terminals, not warehouses, not distribution centers. And, the idea of how, drivers come in and queue is an operational issue. We don't have a tenant. This commission can't regulate who our tenant will be, and that's something we would have to approach at that time. But the assumption that the way this operation will be run with its eventual tenant is going to be exactly the same as the things that Mr. Butler's experience doesn't have any basis in fact. My client has developed other distribution centers that, without check-in gates. It's not a requirement of some national security law, as was suggested, that since 9/11 this is mandatory. It is not. The purpose of proposing that in this approval we eliminate the gate is in part a way of giving the town, this commission, administrative control in the event that in the future we have a tenant that wants to have a gate, that would necessitate our getting the plan revised and coming back with their operational plan, with their plans for the gate, and then a justification for why the operations of the facility as modified would not create any type of violation of your regulations.
So you wouldn't object to a condition on an approval that said that no truck should idle more than 3 minutes, or whatever the limit is, depending on the temperature?
No, if you want to, obviously that is a statement of the law, and if you want to add it as a condition, I don't think we would have, any reason to make an objection to that.
And our zoning enforcement officer, if we found people, our truckers idling for more than 3 minutes, at least in the summer, we would be able to issue a cease and desist order and so on.
Right. They could do the same thing that the South Windsor Police Department could do by ticketing, and they could do the same thing that the EPA and DEP have done with regard to a number of truck and bus fleets around the region over the last 10 to 12 years, where they have, on the basis of complaints, they do have a hotline. They do have an idling law hotline that has led to a number of enforcement actions, and there are even private environmental groups that have enforced these, including one recently against a school bus company, based on their violation of idling regulations. So, it is a real regulatory program. It does have real teeth and real consequences to the people who violate it or allow violations in their at their facilities.
Do you have anything else,
I
Steve?
hear you, but I guess I'm also hearing a disconnect that it's unsafe for a truck to leave without performing these tests, so, I don't know how we get that clarified. I mean, maybe that's outside the idling limit.
It is, all I can cite is something that, actually that, the intervener said earlier that some drivers will rev up. And as, noted, one of the assumptions in the Brooks Acoustics test was we're talking about, full throttle operation as the basis for what they're assuming the decibels being generated are. Again, operational issues, there are, auxiliary power units, there are all sorts of technologies out there that, may or may not be used by a tenant or the people they contract with for their transportation services.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I do not believe there's any other questions, comments from commissioners. So at this point, it would be time to state your closing concerns. So I'll leave it to the applicant. Would you like to go last before the interveners? Okay. So I'll call the interveners forward. If there's anything additional you'd like to add, now is the time. Mr. Butler?
Sure, just real quick. Just based on the setup of the building.
Please speak into the microphone,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
Thank you.
Just due to the setup of the building, the traffic flow, the inability to queue on site, inability to make turns on site just because the trailer yard is so tight to the building. The potential health hazard of exhaust, 13 plus foot stacks with height over proposed berms and so forth. I feel that the site is not right for this particular area. And I'm going to leave it with that.
Okay, thank you. We have a few other interveners, two being Karen Viklinitz and Gerald Giuliare. Are they in attendance? Would you like to add anything?
I'm Karen Viklinitz of 88 Edgewood Drive, and I agree with all the documentation that has been presented tonight, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. And John Hapkowitz, I don't believe he's in attendance tonight, but if he is, I apologize. Is there anything he'd like to add? Nothing? Okay. Then at this time, any closing comments from the applicant?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, my name is James Connor. I'm the attorney for the applicant. The applicant studied the permitted uses in the I industrial zone prior to its buying the land early in 2021. And the plan in the application reflects its investment-backed expectation that it will be allowed to build in accordance with the current regulations. This application is for a site plan approval. It's not for special exception approval. The use is warehouse and distribution center. It is not for a truck and transportation terminal. The site plan application adheres to and exceeds the requirements of the regulations, with setbacks from the property line substantially in excess of the minimum on the sides that abut residential uses. The proposed use, along with Other uses, such as manufacturing, is a permitted use in the I industrial zone, subject only to site plan approval. There are other warehouses and distribution centers in the I industrial zone that have been permitted under that process. The statement by the Connecticut Supreme Court in the case in 1979 called Beit Havura versus the Zoning Board of Appeals of Norfolk stated, quote, "The designation of a particular use of property as a permitted use establishes a conclusive presumption that such use does not adversely affect the district and precludes further inquiry into its effect on traffic, municipal services, property values, or the general harmony of the district." This case has been reaffirmed repeatedly, this formulation of the effect of making something a site plan use in appeals of Planning and Zoning Commission since then, and it applies to this situation. The I industrial zone regulations already take into account that industrial parcels on the boundary of a residential zone are treated differently in order to mitigate adverse impacts to adjacent residential users by the specific means of requiring a buffer as well as a setback, and by doing what's been done here to orient the loading docks so they do not face the residential neighborhoods. The regulations do not require the site plan applicant to submit any acoustical engineering study. You know, there's been a great deal discussed tonight about the pros and cons of the report submitted. But to point out that you know, that there's no requirement to try to prove in advance that these ordinances will be satisfied, although we think in the specific instance that we were asked to produce a study on, it does demonstrate that. That we have agreed to provide, in addition to what was shown on the plans at the outset of the application, to construct the 12 by 60 foot sound barrier fence at the southwesterly corner of the building to specifically address sound emissions transmitted from the truck yard in the southerly direction. In response to Commissioner Wagner's questions at the November 9th hearing, the applicant obtained earlier today from Bennett Brooks of Brooks Acoustics of Vernon an analysis specific to the site layout and its effect on 124 Wedgwood Drive as measured immediately off the property line. And that was a specific area that was raised at the November 9th hearing. The Brooks report shows that the sound barrier fence, along with the evergreen interplantings and the berm, are sufficient to reduce the impact of noise at that property line to 43 decibels. One thing I did want to point out is earlier in some of the discussion about the requirements of the ordinances that I believe Mr. Parks misstated what the level was. It is 51 decibels because the emitter is in an industrial zone, and I believe he picked a lower limit that is not what's contained in the regulations. The applicant is committed to supplementing the existing vegetation with 50 feet of interplanting in the required buffer, since that is the regulation specifically stated means of mitigating sound and air quality impacts of developments in the I industrial zone. The regulations don't require that the traffic report submitted as part of the application studying any intersections remote from the site driveways, but applicant's traffic engineers have nonetheless done so. They prepared the report based on a conservative assumption that this will be a high cube warehouse, and have shown that additional traffic can be managed without a decrease in level of service through management of signal timing. The applicant has provided, and as we've just discussed, they show queuing space for 8 trucks at the entrance and are agreeable to having the current application approved with the elimination of the gate so as to take away any limitation on 8 trucks to allow circulation within the site, within the truck yard. As I discussed in response to one of the chairman's questions, there are not currently any indirect source air emissions programs in the state of Connecticut, nor do your regulations require the creation of any air emission studies in order to get a site plan approved in the I zone. I believe I also, in response to that question, discussed some of the ongoing, or actually maybe it was a question from Commissioner Wagner about DEP's ongoing anti-idling enforcement efforts and the existence of a hotline for violations and for the dispatch by DEP field inspectors to determine whether idling violations are taking place. It has not been, I think, discussed since prior meetings, but we have been in touch with representatives of Carlos Pasta, who sent a representative to a prior hearing, and we have discussed with them the truck signage and drainage inspection issues that were their specific concerns. And I believe they did correspond with the commission, indicating that the original request concerning signs is something that we're cooperating with them on to provide a signage program that's not in accordance with their first letter. Their request for a 3-year inspection requirement is at this point consistent with a condition that was contained in the wetlands permit that was issued by the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency, so that we do expect to be providing the 3-year inspection of the drainage system that they requested. The applicant is committed to work cooperatively with any tenant to communicate to truck drivers making deliveries and pickups at the facility, primarily through a signage program that they are required to comply with both the state anti-idling law and the South Windsor anti-idling ordinance, and to use the Route 5 approach to reach Talbot Lane when arriving and to turn left only at the Talbot and Governor's intersection on departure. The regulations do not refer to impact on property valuations, and the state Supreme Court case that I quoted a little while ago also indicates that where a site plan approval is all that is required, property valuations do not figure into the commission's decision. However, we did have Dr. Poland study a data set and come to testify before the commission back at the hearing on the 9th, and to supplement his personal appearance here with a written report stating the basis for those opinions, citing the academic studies that he referred to, and also the paired sales studies showing the property trends in the immediate vicinity of the Carlos Pasta facility. As was communicated to the commission at the November 9th hearing, the applicant is committed to eliminating one of the 35-foot light poles by reducing it to 25 feet in connection with the waiver request that was submitted in that regard. To address the commission's concern, the applicant has also committed to provide a conservation and buffer easement to the town to give it the ability to enforce permanent maintenance of the planted berm area, in addition to the mandatory interplanted 50-foot buffer area. The applicant is committed to work cooperatively with the town with regard to the creation of future right-of-way with boundaries and design to be determined around the northeast part of the site to facilitate development of a traffic calming measure such as a roundabout to be implemented by the town in the future. The applicant has not only submitted an application that is in compliance with the regulations, but has provided testimony of qualified experts in support of the conclusions that each of the criteria with regard to the effects of the development satisfy the regulations in order to provide the commission substantial evidence for the approval of the application. There's actually one technical point there that I also wanted to comment on with regard to the document that was submitted by some of the opponents tonight concerning lot coverage. I believe they were confusing impervious surface coverage, which is about 54%, with lot coverage, which is below 50%. The maximum impervious surface coverage is actually 65% in the I zone, so that being at 54% is not an issue of noncompliance. The applicant has further presented the testimony of qualified experts with regard to matters not within the four corners of the regulations, but that relate to environmental issues, including those beyond what's in the regulations for this zone, which are actually very limited on environmental issues, or even things that were mentioned in the environmental interveners petitions, such as the potential of the site as wildlife habitat. And as you're aware from having gotten a report from the Illinois Wetlands and Watercourses Agency and Conservation Commission, that body, which has substantial expertise in the issue, did not find that this plan involved the disruption of any critical wildlife habitat. The environmental interveners have criticized various reports, but as they have noted, they have found it difficult to get oppositional experts and have not done any of their own analysis, but have raised questions and speculation about how future operations might take place at this site without meeting the burden of proving through their own expert testimony that there is any sort of noncompliance with the provisions of your regulations. Therefore, with regard to the interveners and the lack of such expert testimony, we would urge the Commission to make a finding on the record similar to the findings made by the Illinois Wetlands and Watercourses Agency with regard to the intervention petitions that were made before that agency, that the interveners have not shown by substantial evidence that there is a reasonable likelihood of unreasonable pollution under the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act, and that there's no need to determine whether there are feasible and prudent alternatives to this development. Because the applicant has met all the requirements of the site plan regulations and more, has done more than the minimum required by the regulations in order to be respectful of neighboring uses as outlined below, as outlined before, we respectfully request that the Commission approve the site plan, subject only to such standard conditions and the fulfillment of the applicant's commitments as previously outlined and discussed tonight, including such items as the elimination of the gate at the entrance drive. We realize that this has been something that has required a great deal of time and effort on the part of the Commission and on the part of the staff, and we thank you for all of that time and for all the thought and attention that each of you and I guess some of the former members of this body who were present when the hearing first got underway devoted to this matter over the last many weeks. That concludes the applicant's summation.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything else? Staff, anything else?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Then I'll declare the public hearing closed at 10:43 p.m. And I think that's enough for tonight. I think the town wants us out of here by 10:30 anyway, right? Or no?
I think it's 11:30, but if it's enough, it's enough. I don't think anybody would object to leaving.
So at this point, we are adjourned.
Chairman, can we just make clear next week we'll be putting it on for decision? Is that my understanding of our agenda?
Yes.
So we'll have our public hearing next week that we have already previously scheduled for Evergreen Walk, and then we'll have this on as a decision item.
Okay.
That'll be our calendar,
Yeah, yes.
because we'll be putting out an agenda tomorrow with
We'll-
the holiday.
Probably also have Evergreen Walk for decision too, correct?
We probably will be keeping those hearings open for information, but
Okay, okay,
we
thank
can
you.
always add them on if there's time. Okay?
Okay,
Now you
thank
can
you.
have a motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Well, if we started earlier, but she's on.